Okay. Yeah. Hello, everybody. This is Eden. What are we? September 6th. Eden open mic. Some big news today with the announcement of funding from the EOS Foundation to Eden of 200,000 EOS lump sum, and then an additional 200 EOS per Eden member at the time of the election, as I understand it. So yeah, so that's the big news, and part of that news is this incentivization of growing the Eden membership for more EOS tokens to be in the actual treasury. And so the question is, does that create a sort of a disincentive or a moral hazard to invite less than ideal candidates or less than ideal Eden members? So, Josh, you were telling us about maybe just from the beginning what you've been working on and focusing on Edens on EOS.
Yeah, you had mentioned like maybe we have to. There's been comments mentioned in the community about like there's not that many people in EOS that would, at this point want to join something like Eden, which does require like revealing your identity and it kind of takes away the anonymous component, which a lot of people are not willing to do, which is very understandable. And you're putting your reputation on the line and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, basically you're joining a collective that's the idea is to improve the EOS ecosystem. And Eden on EOS is one of the main killer apps or dApps on, well, Eden OS deployed on EOS, which we call Eden on EOS, is like a major dApp that is, you have to be an EOS user to use it. So if we fill up our membership that's capped at 10,000 members, a lot of those 10,000 members probably didn't know about EOS or didn't have EOS accounts before they joined, is what we're sort of speculating, that to really fill up the membership, we would have to go beyond the EOS community. And then it's like, well, what would be attractive to those people? And what I've been thinking a lot about is creating and evolving more Edens built on the EOS public network, but maybe not like basically DAOs with fractal governance, but maybe the focus wouldn't necessarily be just improving the EOS ecosystem. It would be whatever the purpose of that particular DAO is, but it would be using the EOS network. It would bring users to the EOS network. And it would, it'd be, to me, it aligns what the mandate of the foundation is in terms of funding multiple Edens. It aligns with also, I guess, the foundation's goal of getting more users on EOS, the EOS network being utilized for real life things, not just like technical developer type stuff. And it also obviously aligns with the Clarion team and what they want to see happening with Eden OS. Just a few like examples of some obvious alignment there. And so creating more of these things would be a great way to build attraction of people who would be attracted to those other kinds of DAOs, or starting them. If you want to start them, you join the Genesis group, and then we would somehow figure out how to help you bootstrap and get that going and improve it, like the custodian of all Edens kind of a situation.
Yeah, makes sense. What do you think, Jesse? So, can't hear you yet. Well, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Josh. And it's the point where we just start inviting and encouraging people to join who aren't necessarily into the EOS piece. Like we just have to reduce that restriction, Eden on EOS, and just highlight the fact that this is this Eden process, multiple different ways of, well, it's a way to have a DAO, like you say, right? And then you get people into this group, and the EOS bit can be less relevant than maybe just the learning how the Eden process works and then taking that information to start up their own use case of the method itself.
But hopefully using the EOS public network
Yeah.
to operate it.
Well, what would be neat is maybe I'm curious because Dan or Jesse, yeah, before I kind of pivot to something else that's interesting, what do you think about this?
Yeah, hey, sorry guys. I think makes total sense. It's a great idea, but I think we need to kind of get get some interest going first with the Genesis community and kind of prove it there. So it seems to me like putting the cart before the horse, as they say, a little bit. But in terms of, but I want to bring up like what you first started with about the quality control. From my perspective, yes, that's a concern, but the community, I think, is small enough where the people that are coming in interested just because they're seeing funding, like they're already in the community. So I think that the risk of fraud is less because we're not really popular yet. But I think that's much more of a concern when the idea gets more mainstream.
Yeah. I suppose we just have to hope that the numbers are sufficiently, like there's a greater percentage of people who care and are here to do good things for EOS than the people who flood in to just try to grab some coins.
Yeah, but why wouldn't if like they're in EOS, they hold EOS. Like
Yeah.
all these people that are coming in hold EOS. And so like the beautiful thing about blockchain and crypto is the token that aligns everyone. And
Yeah.
I think that kind of protects us here.
It's true. And even still, if you get a flood of disparate people who all selfishly want it, if there's a bunch of people want to game it individually, they're too individual. They'd have to collude if they want to be
Right.
successful because you
Yeah.
have to have a good idea still to make it even make sense.
Yeah. The Eden, and so yeah, the Eden process and gives more protection for that. So I was in the Eden on EOS when this came out. Me and Dario were like, or I was even saying, yo, let's just onboard, like, let's get as many people as we can in this, because I feel like we're protected.
Yeah. Yeah. As long, and I think we just maybe push it. If it's people we don't know at all, we force them to do a blog post. I like the idea. I've done this a couple times where I just made it a video. I did a 10-minute call with somebody who I didn't know,
Yeah.
but I just asked them some questions. What do you think of Dan's book? And I gave them a chance to talk a lot. And it seemed to work. Like you can get a rough feel. I mean, sociopath's gonna sociopath, and they're gonna trick you if they're gonna. But generally, you, people
I think it'd
get
be
that.
good to maybe go over, because at least for me personally, I don't 100% understand what the risk. So let's say someone or me invites someone that tries to defraud the community. What are the what are the processes, and like the circumstance matter? Like how does that work?
That's a great question. I'm gonna bring up the peace treaty to see if there's anything about this because
Well,
it's
does
true, right?
defrauding the community mean spending money on something that doesn't actually add value and never gets used?
Yeah, great gray area introduced.
Yeah, like they no, that someone lies in the election.
I don't know what this is where it's funny. Yeah, you're right. What difference does it make? Maybe people would just not trust you as much. But if you have a reputation otherwise, like this is, say for example, there's been a few of us who've done a ton of introductions. I've done it. I've done a bunch. Like I have. I was looking at my NFT collection and I was shocked with how many I've collected because whether you're a
Yeah,
witness or an inviter, you get their NFT,
right.
right? And I was like, holy crap, I've got my fingerprints all over this. And so, I mean, yeah, there's a chance that we're gonna like someone's gonna slip through that we're not. Does that mean we're the baby with the bathwater? We're out just because. So I see
Right.
your point, right? Like, yeah, and then I think if it's well documented too, maybe like it was clear that this was a sort of a high level induction and it made sense. Like for example, great like there's so many great examples. The Bywire guy, Michael O'Sullivan, he interviewed
Yeah.
Dan. You guys saw that. It was a great interview. I don't know this guy, Michael O'Sullivan. I'm gonna invite him because he did a good interview, and I don't know. He could be lying. He could still be like who knows, right? But I don't think so. So you take the risk. So if it turns out he does
Yeah.
do some defrauding type thing, which like you say, Josh, how do you even define that? Like how clear is that?
Right.
Does it really shine bad? I mean, everyone else could be like, yeah, it made sense, Chris, that you picked like I think you know what I mean. As long as it's somewhat justifiable that you're not being reckless with your invites, I think you'd still keep good standing.
Yeah. At least from my perspective, if you lie, then you should be on the hook. But if someone you invites, does something bad, maybe like the first time it's all good, or maybe even the second time too. But if you invited like a third person who defrauds the community, okay, then maybe that's something to look at. I don't know. That's just my personal view.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So here's the peace treaty currently. Members must be invited according to community bylaws and can be removed according to community bylaws. So that means we're going to need some bylaws from Dan by October 6th.
Yeah.
At least that's what I take away from
October
that.
9th.
9th, sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Because there isn't much for bylaws thus far.
Well, there was that Mike Manfredi video that he did with Brandon where he went over the process of like in the you guys saw it, right? In the initial induction, like scenario 1, scenario 2, is it negligence? Is it fraud? So they're working on it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think but it's like the gray area of what does defraud mean and what are there penalties for the inviter? Like it's loose. It'd be like community reputation damage only thus far.
No,
maybe-
you have to stake EOS. If you're gonna invite someone in the future, you have to stake EOS. And then if something goes wrong, and then your EOS.
But that's only for their profile. That wasn't meant to apply to like indefinitely. You wouldn't stake it and leave it within some sort of bond indefinitely for the duration of someone's membership. It's just to get them from having no more bad pictures or links that don't work. That's what you're putting a bond on.
Yeah,
Perhaps
maybe quality.
Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead.
I was going to say maybe quality is not like our standard of quality is maybe not like you're not if your quality you're not defrauding the community. Our standard of quality should probably be a little bit higher than that. Like like are you engaged in the EOS community and like doing something as an Eden member some that is aligned with your passion and skill set and with the goals of Eden and with EOS. Do we want members who are extremely passive and not engaged? When I think of quality, that's kind of what I'm thinking of.
Dan, I remember he commented on this, and his comment was basically, if you join Eden and you pay your dues and never participate, that's good. I mean, the bigger the numbers, the more people that pay their dues every year, that's more funding. And if you don't participate, it means you're perfectly satisfied with how the process works. And
Josh,
so,
I agree with you. Josh, I agree with you at a certain scale. We will be able and be justified to raise the bar when we have more scale. But as of right now, the bar is just lower because we're new.
Yeah. Hey, good morning, John. I think it's morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. What do you think of the news? I'm sure you've heard.
I haven't actually. I've only just woken up and got into the office. I just sat down with my coffee. What's happened?
There's some good news. There's a post from Dan that funding has arrived to Eden from the foundation. So it's a lump sum deposit of 200,000 EOS and then an additional 200 EOS per member. I assume it's up to some deadline in advance of the election. So now it's the invite your spouses and cousins and aunts and uncles to Eden game. Hey, Mark.
Wow, I thought it was just 200 per person. I didn't realize it was a big chunk plus the 200 per person.
Yeah, 200,000 plus 200 per person.
How much is that in US dollars then? 200,000. Where are we at for US price?
Like 1.2 million for the 200 EOS.
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah.
So it's 4,000 EOS for the sortition winner monthly, and
Yeah.
and then 8 delegates will get 500 EOS. Is that what I said?
So this is what I found that interesting because that means it's groups of 8. If I'm understanding that correctly. Because if you
I think there are
eight,
projections. projection, I think.
Yeah, well, it's just your group size would determine, well, maybe not. I don't know. It's how do you pick? It seemed like the group size was four and the chief delegate was four. Like there was a match between group, but perhaps it doesn't, you could still have groups of four and just have more and have eight in the last round. And it's not, it doesn't match the previous rounds.
Yeah, I did a breakdown this week of having groups of 4, 5, and 6 on a little quick Excel sheet to see how many tiers we would end up with, starting with 170. Wait, I think with 1,000 people I did it, but I was just kind of getting a feel for that structure, that flow, and I noticed it's hard to determine the answer to questions like we've just asked. You have to kind of write it out. You got to do the little matrix math and be like, okay, get a feel for it. And so,
Yeah, here it is in Dan's post. So 4,000, like it's what you said, Josh, right? 4,000 EOS per month would be the winner. The next layer down, about 8 delegates. So that's interesting. About 8, about 40 for the one below that. But actual funding depends on the number. Yeah. So I guess we'll just sort of see, because if numbers, we got a month, so we could go from 170 to 570 or 270, and there's a big spread there, right? So perhaps how the breakdown is really dependent on how we do for onboarding. I'll put this link in the chat for you, John, since you haven't seen it yet.
Thank you.
Definitely good news, Mr. Boyd. And is that Yves LaRose who's joined us? If so, great to have you. Excellent news today. Hey, John Boyd, any comments, thoughts on the announcement?
Yeah, looks good. I think it's a good starter amount of funding to prove things out without risking too large of a chunk of funds. It would be cool to see the MSIG and have that go through, but I understand there's a process. So yeah, I think it's a good time now for the Eden community to finalize what projects they want to fund and put together proposals and start marketing them and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. The campaigning will begin. Everyone's going to add, yeah, Yves just added EOS Foundation to his name. And Jesse, you've got EOS Bees. I have to figure out what I'm going to pitch. Got to add it to my name. Let the shilling begin.
Yeah, I decided that I'm going to pitch my eosaccounts.io idea. And I'm going to be like a product manager for that project and not the main developer. So that way I can campaign for it and get it off the ground without putting the man hours into it, because I just don't have the time. But I think it's a good idea that could benefit EOS greatly. So I'm gonna go for it.
Is that the prepaid account? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be putting up a site to explain it all and the amount of funding that I'm asking for and things like that, probably within the next week.
Awesome.
Nice.
Looking forward to it. Is it would it be something you'll allow other people to also pitch on your behalf as well? I mean, I suppose you really can't stop anybody.
Yeah, I mean,
if I win, I'll give money to John to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I would, yeah, the only reason that I would be pitching it is just because if I didn't have any other support, but if I had lots of other people pitching it, then it makes it a lot easier for me, for sure. Absolutely.
Right on. There'll be a few people who will basically, I'm running on 17 different things, and here they all are. What happens how do they all get enough money then if you win?
Right.
be the first question I'd ask.
Well, I think it's important for each project to explain like the minimum amount of funding that they need in order to reach like an important milestone, and then like the maximum amount that they would need for the next 6 months. So that way you can try and prioritize how the funds are divided based on that information.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You got to have an answer to if you're lucky or not lucky, sortition winner or not. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. And obviously, Jesse, you're going to be running on the bees, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
excited.
Go ahead, John. You look like you want to say something.
I do and I don't, but I got something in the works as well. I've hired out a 2-man office at WeWork now, so I'm no longer working from home. I'm getting a little bit fancy, and I've got a developer or a few developers that I'm interviewing, and I'm going to build something, for Eden. But I don't want to talk about it too much yet. I want to tell you guys by actually giving you something to play with rather than sell it. So hopefully I got something by the election for you guys to play with, and for you to gauge whether it's of value to the community and if it's worth investing in. But yeah, something's coming.
I love it. Are you going to like sort of campaign in advance, or are you going to sort of present a bit of a pitch early to spread the ideas?
Yeah, well, the idea is I'll have a sort of MVP, going of it that you guys can log into and start playing with, and then and that will be the sort of sales pitch. What you guys think of it when you're playing with it. If you like it, then yeah. But I'll do a little sort of document. But I want to sell it by the experience rather than the talk.
I love it. Awesome. The ideas are flowing, right? People, this is what's been neat about this Eden thing is the people who have been paying attention have sort of been marinating on all sorts of, what could work and what does the community need, and a lot of conversation around what would Eden do. And you could tell people, like, obviously there were ideas, but what's the point of necessarily talking about your idea if there's like it was cart and horse in terms of funding and not funding. So it's nice to see, like you say, John Heater, that it's a nice chunk of money. Like it's not inconsequential by any stretch, and it's not too much. Where I think it was so Eve, if you're listening, good choice on the amount. I think that's a nice sweet spot where it's enough to draw people's interest and to get people wanting to participate, and also not too much where some of the naysayers or those who are still not sure of this process can at least be okay that it's not going to sink the foundation and all the other opportunities that you have to fund. So yeah, good job on that.
What about you, Chris? Thought about
I don't know. I'm nervous. All these good ideas. I feel like I'm not enough of a builder. I have some thoughts. I'd like to just maybe aggregate a few ideas and sort of more project manage and be present and kind of do what I've been doing voluntarily based, and maybe charge an hourly rate and just keep track of it and be really transparent about work I do and turn it into a job of sorts. It's a hard pitch. I don't know. You get teamed up with somebody like Heater and yourself, even, and John Williamson. I think you're going to have probably better projects than I'm going to have. So I don't know. I might have to poach your ideas and just be like, I'm running for everything.
Yeah, I think everyone needs a bit of you, Chris. So like you say, if you go more manager and take care of the broader scope of things, I'd be in favor of that. I don't think I'd like you so focused in one thing. I think everyone needs a bit of you.
Oh, that's nice of you to say, Mr. Williamson. One thing I think that is needed that Aaron Cox, I think we mentioned, we've spoken this before, but Aaron Cox mentioned a while ago, and Eve, actually, I assume you're listening, this is something that came up 3 weeks ago, maybe. It was right after Aaron was announced as being on the advisory board. And at the time, he didn't have many details, and so we didn't go, we didn't have much details to tell us, but he had mentioned the interesting point about transparency in all this, where it's one thing to be transparent as funds leave the foundation and go to a recipient. That's super important, and we all know that that's going to happen. But then it's how transparent is the recipient with what they do with the funds? And that becomes, I think, a lot more logistically difficult for the foundation to try to, because you're obviously going to want to spread these funds to many places. including funds that go through Eden, multiple recipients, Pomelo, multiple recipients, it's going to be a very difficult task for even anybody. Which is, the suggestion is that I think what I'd like to maybe do is offer this transparency as a service, where any recipient of money could voluntarily choose to use me as a middleman to kind of aggregate all these different recipients and have like put up a site, do interviews, do like the weekly board meetings that I've been doing with the mock trial board now, and kind of do these short little meetings with all these recipients and track their progress and make it short, quick, but at least a centralized point. And if people trust me, then they can trust that I'm not being bought off and, you know, saying things that are not being done to the recipient. So it's an option. I don't know. It's kind of out there, but at least it does that tracking on the recipient side as opposed to just from the foundation to the recipient.
Yeah, I think
Andrew said it's an audit. It's an audit. You would be an auditor. Most worker proposal systems have them. Said Eve.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It sounds, well, to me, it sounds a little bit more like a marketing job, like kind of like a pod. You're like the you're like an investigative reporter.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
basically.
the one tweak, or at least from what you said, is that the projects voluntarily hire you, I think is what you said. But I think that the money should come from Eden or the foundation.
Right.
And then there's no voluntary. You just look at the projects, whether they like it or not.
Oh, that's a good point. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. They don't have to have, I mean, yeah, the dialogue with me would be voluntary. And you're right
Right.
about funding. I don't think, at first in my head, I thought, yeah, I could charge like a fee, but then that's total conflict of interest. So no, the payment for my time would have to come from Eden, for example, in this case. But yeah, you're right. I could still look all I want and and trace out things on the blockchain and see what I can see. Hopefully, though, I'd like to make it where it's more of a dialogue. Like part of what I'm, you know, a thing that I'm is building community and getting us to engage and talk and introducing faces and becoming humans and not just pseudonymous or anonymous, you know, avatars. So ideally there'd be like a conversation. Like, so for example, great example, Aaron Cox from Grey Mass, right? They've got plans. If I could do a monthly 15-minute conversation, quick questions, I poke them with a couple details, and it's like almost like a live recorded, unedited, like raw, and then just that I think would be useful. But the person, they may not want to talk to me, right? Jesse, you may be like, screw you, Barnes, I'm not talking to you. The bees are doing their own thing. But right,
Well,
but
yeah,
I could
or
still
even,
look.
yeah, and you know, projects are going to, for example, my project, we plan on making videos, like recording our meetings in public, but those are probably gonna be long videos, and you know, someone probably should, you know, go through it and report on what's going on, so it doesn't, so not everyone has to watch the videos. So
Yeah, it's a good idea. Well, thank you for helping me come up with a plan, because it's loose at this point in time.
but it's good. It's a good idea, I think.
Camille, I'm nervous, man. I like already. I'm just imagining getting teamed up with, like, against Dan, like right there, like that. To me, first round luck, right? There's a tough chance.
Well, this brings up a question. In the second trial election, I wasn't able to participate. From what I understood, that there was two groupings of people that were running for funds and people that weren't. And so, is that going to continue in this election?
So it's the idea of pre-sorting the original
Right.
randomization, right? Yeah. So you pre-sort those who have triggered that they want to run and not run. I don't think that's going to happen here, because I don't see in the UI where you check a box that you plan to move forward or not. And the only way you could do that is if you had that in the UI, since it is. We did talk about that, and I think I forget how it ended. I don't know if it was too complicated. I don't think it was too complicated. I just think it wasn't on the to-do like early enough to get the automation out. But I know for the Zoom it was too complicated. Like they were going to do that for the second trial. That was like, we were okay, we're going to do it, and then turned out it was too difficult to do the random breakout rooms in Zoom, having like either you pick those who are moving forward or those who don't want to move forward, randomize those, and then shuffle in the other group. It was just too arduous.
Well, I think a big tool that we are going to, or you are going to want to, or a big tool that will emerge as a real force is going to be always talking to the voters about including a little bit of like what the losing candidate wants to do. So if, say, you're involved with, say, I don't know, a Dan Laram or a John Boyd or something, I don't know, is anyone a real shoe-in for winning an election? I don't know. But if you are, and they're gonna advance, a good skill set would be appealing to the additional, say, 2 voters to say, hey, cut me in some on this, please. So
Right.
I think that's basically gonna be a real tool that's gonna emerge, become very popular, is the trust that comes with, okay, take this money and move forward, but kind of somehow appeal to the voters to say, okay, it's on voice record that you'll cut a 10% of the entire take off to this fella because he's great also.
I think people are going to try that. Yeah. Vote for me and I'll still give you a piece of what you want for yours. The risk is going to be you can only do that so much. You're going to shave, you're going to cut your pie up into too many small slices. But like you say, it's a good, yeah, for sure. That's an angle. And for those watching this video, because I don't post this with the chat, I'm noticing a couple comments. Troy Bryan says the bees reminds me of Smart Cash, but I like it very much. Good job starting that. Eve is listening.
Thank you,
He's always
Troy.
listening, and he reads every chat. Thank you, Eve. And it's called an audit. I'd be an auditor. Most worker proposal systems have them. So yes, thank you for that. That is what I will run for then, an auditor. It's my middle name is Aaron Sobey, CAB, Chris Auditor Barnes. Yeah, right on. So John, for your office, I think you need some artwork. Can you do that in a WeWork space? Are you allowed?
Yeah, maybe if I just get some blue tack or something in the back, I don't know. But yeah, I still got to come up with a name and a logo and all that. But yeah, it's exciting stuff.
Pretty cool. Yeah, imagine this is pretty exciting. All these neat ideas, and what's neat too about this is there's just excitement about potential, right? Like hype. We've all seen the power of hype, and hype is unrealized potential that people kind of get into, and now we're starting to see this what's this unrealized potential within the EOS ecosystem. We have this software, this platform, we can do all these great things. We thought there was tons of potential, and things were going to come from Block One, those who shall not be named. And now it's like, no, wait a minute. What can we, the community, do? What's there to be done on this wicked blockchain that seems to be underutilized? So we've got John Heaters looking to build more accounts and help with account creation, marketing with the EOS Bees. It's to be determined, an unknown secret from John Williamson.
John, how long have you been working on this?
Not very long, only about 3-4 weeks. And then that's in my spare time as I'm still working full time on a current engagement that I'm wrapping up. But yeah.
Well,
Exciting.
EOS needs a good porn site, so I think you might be onto something.
So I was thinking about that, like OnlyFans for EOS or something like that. Again, there's pornography and the internet always go well together.
Hey,
so
sex sells. I mean, the logo would be super easy. We could just, yeah.
And maybe Eden election 2031. We can maybe do that.
I got a question. Is this 200,000 EOS across the next 12 months? Or will it be refunded in 12 months? It'll be a lump sum immediately available or paid out monthly?
No, so it'd be a lump sum to the treasury. So it'll be 200,000 EOS plus an additional 200 EOS to the community's treasury per Eden member who joins before the election. So it means it'll be a lump sum that's deposited. It becomes the Eden treasury. And then the way the smart contract is written, 5% of whatever that treasury is per month will be allocated to the winners. And then that'll be divided amongst the tiers, right? Where say there's 3 tiers, 1/3 of 5%, whatever that is. So it'd be say we get up to 250,000 EOS, roughly. Say we pump the numbers. We've got, I think that's 250 members. So it'd be 250,000 EOS. That's like 12,500 EOS per month would be 5%. But then it diminished because once you draw that 12,500 EOS, the next month you're going to have slightly less because the
Okay.
lump sum is now smaller, so 5% of a smaller number, and that's how it would break down month by month.
And-
For six,
and-
go ahead.
That's great. And then, so that'll draw it down, and you said 6 months, but what was the significance of 6 months?
That's the time between each election. So the elections are hard coded or fixed at every 6 months. And so that's what that means. So you basically winners would win. They would receive, there'd be a 5% allocation per month, slowly diminishing the pot. But then again, you'd have new members come, so 10 more EOS per new member. So that treasury is going to fluctuate. Some people could donate. Maybe we'll get a, so there, this is what's also interesting is that even though you've won and you have, okay, I've won for 6 months now, I'm getting funding regardless of where you land. That funding is not, you have like a minimum baseline because there's going to be no quick pull of funding. But if all of a sudden block one says, hey, here you go, here's 1 million EOS or any whale, right? All of a sudden now your 5% allocate or your percent allocation just jumped well in the middle of your term because the treasury went up. So then your 5% or the 5% of the treasury that you get your piece of would have gone up. So this is where it's kind of interesting where you could see swings and variation in funding. But then
Okay,
6 months
very
later,
cool.
new election, and yeah, it just rinse
Yeah,
and repeat.
and as far as like, you explained that really well, Chris, thank you. And as far as the foundation goes, with what Eves has done, it's really, we'll revisit that down the line, basically, for any kind of updated funding from the block, from the
From the foundation.
chain, from the foundation. The
Sure.
foundation got it from, I thought, inflation. Where did the foundation get it from?
So name fees and RAM fees were the first distribution that was given to the grants.is EOSIO account that
Got
the
it.
foundation has control of. So that was like 3.5 million EOS. So they've got plenty in their war chest here to do lots with. And Eve actually has a couple comments here. Look at the Dash worker proposal system. You can use it as a baseline for the audits, tons of infographics and text for your pitch. Sweet, thank you, Eve. I absolutely will. And then he's saying onset elections should be faster than 6 months, looking at 3 months between the first and second. That's interesting. And what else is interesting too is if we look at the peace treaty, one of the lines in that peace treaty is that an election is triggered. Here, say this is funny, like this word, I'll share the screen. It definitely needs to be updated because even this is not quite accurate. It says here that elections shall occur at least annually. So we know that's, and this is, I'm looking at this is an edited version of the peace treaty to come in. So it's got some lines through, but here it says that elections are annually or maybe triggered by a petition of 10% of the membership according to the bylaws. But then where's the one about it growth? Is it removed? Because remember there was one that said after the community's grown by 10%, it would trigger an election.
I do remember that, but
Right,
I
was
don't
that
remember
something?
it specifically being in the peace treaty.
Is that actually supported by a contract, the sort of 10% petition rule, or is that something that the community just has to do?
Bylaws. Yeah, it just says, yeah, this is the one we actually all signed up for and agreed to. But here it says
There it is. Yep.
elections at least annually or may be triggered by a petition of 10% of the membership according to the bylaws, which do not define this yet. According to the bylaws piece is not defined. Because one thing that came up, I thought I think, yeah, it's made more sense is that if you're going to petition for an election, don't do it across the entire Eden membership. Do it across maybe the first set of those who were elected, like that first layer that moved on from the base round. Because it's easier, like they moved up, so that means they have some responsibility they got some funding, because once you get past the first round, there's funding. And so maybe, and it's less, like all the people who aren't engaged, that might be an Eden member, trust the process, they pay their annual dues, but really they don't have time, they don't pay attention to anything else otherwise. To have them have to participate in a vote to call out fraud and trigger an early election probably doesn't make a lot of sense. Where instead, if you have people who were voted in, then are paying attention, do care a little more, have them trigger the election, 10% of that group maybe be enough, or a larger percentage perhaps, maybe greater than 10%, 2/3 plus one, for example, right? But it's not, it'd be a bylaws. Bottom line, it should be in the bylaws, and we don't have them. So I think we, hopefully Dan is going to have a whole set of bylaws for us to look at once it starts.
Chris, could I clarify something that you said when you were describing, like, if Eden gets more funding, then your 5% goes up, that conversation?
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
So let's, whatever, you make it to any round, but it's only in that 6-month period though, right? Like, your funding could go up if Eden receives new funding within the 6-month period that you made it to that round.
Exactly.
Because when the next, or it could be 3 months, like Eve just said, or maybe it's just 3 months. If there's
Yeah.
like, the point is, when there's the next election, everything gets scrapped, and then we revote. That's correct, right?
The recipients become scrapped. That's right. The treasury at the time of the new election then would be whatever it is, right? The treasury, whatever it happens to be, then that becomes your distribution onward.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, which is interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting point. If, like Eve mentioned here, that they're looking at 3 months between the first and second election, that should be, hopefully that can be firmed sooner than later, because as it goes to pitches, like, so John Heater, like everyone here looking to pitch something, you might have a project that you have sort of, I need X thousand of EOS to make this happen. That number is going to be super dependent on the duration that you're in power, right? So it'll help us sharpen the pitches to have a better idea of, if there's an idea that, yeah, if this is going to be not 6 months, it'll be 3 months, then that'll be good to know in advance. And the bylaws, like, it'd be nice. We were talking earlier, I think before you joined, Eve, about the potential moral hazard of having funding tied to membership count, where now there's a push to just invite everybody. My uncle, my aunt, my cousin, they're all getting invites, the random people on the street, just to pump the numbers. I don't think that'll happen, although I'm going to invite my wife for sure. I think we should all be inviting our spouses. We trust them, whether they participate or not. They own EOS vicariously through us. So I think that should easily be a way to practically double the numbers if we all invited up.
How
Someone like
easy
that.
is it to influence our wives' decision making in the election?
If your wife wants to run too, like, well, never mind for funding, but just to be a voter. Mine's going to shill for me. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. Why not, right? Whatever group she ends up in, you should vote for Chris in the next round, then I'll vote for you. Deal?
Should we have our wives there, or girlfriends, or whatever?
Sure, why not? Yeah, if you trust them. I mean, it's a trust machine, right? Eden's a trust machine about things that are good for EOS. And my wife knows enough about EOS because of all the garbage, not garbage, but she doesn't really care, really, like, not like I do. But she'll listen to me talk about it, so she knows about stuff. Like, she's informed.
That's the key word. You said she doesn't really care.
No, it's that EOS isn't her passion, but democracy is, and I am. So if EOS is good for me, and she owns EOS because we work common law, so she still wants the project to do well. Like, she cares. She just doesn't care she won't know enough about the details of the EOS, like, how does the blockchain work? But does she need to? Do you need to have that sort of background to be an objective, conscientious voter? That's the whole point of rational ignorance. Like, this process solves for, you can be rationally ignorant and still have a voice and participate in democracy.
Yeah, but again, to be part of the community, you got to have an interest in the well-being of the community, kind of thing. And how much does she care about the EOS community if she, isn't into blockchain and, EOS in general, kind of thing? Like, if she's not independently joining Eden,
Yep.
Without your influence at all, then should she be a member?
Well, you don't get to say no, because I'm going to invite her, and as long
Yeah,
as we have two witnesses.
exactly.
But here's the thing, though.
But yeah, I'm just saying what
No, I
would be
know.
best for Eden overall.
I understand. No, I totally hear what you're saying. I personally think that, and yeah, I think before you joined, John, we were talking about this question of the moral hazard, and are we going to have less ideal people join Eden now due to this incentive. And I think that in the end, maybe we just have to loosen this restriction a bit about Eden on EOS. And perhaps we could start to open it up to people we trust that are totally interested in Dan's book and interested in true democracy and are paying attention to the world at large and see the bigger application that this is. And maybe that's okay. Trust, and they care about the process, and they don't have to be as into EOS. I don't think that that's necessarily a conflict. It may just mean that during a particular round and you're pitching your project, John, and my wife Karen doesn't really understand tech, you can still pitch it to her. Like, you can still explain what it is. And she's not, like, she's still going to have some business sense and some gut feeling sense about whether you sound trustworthy or believable or compelling. Like, that's human interaction stuff. It doesn't depend on your previous knowledge about EOS. So, right. So that's the other thing too, like, say, yeah, she doesn't know about EOS, but she's not going to pick something that sounds like it's absolutely bad for EOS. Like, she cares enough.
But that's the thing though. What would she know is bad for EOS or isn't, if she doesn't know enough about, EOS? Because again, even at the hackathon, right, and back in Sydney, there was a bunch of bloody projects that sound really cool, kind of thing, and they get the hype going, but they were crap ideas, in the long term, and I don't remember any of them that have survived or gone on, with the, was it 200 grand, funding that they got, or 100,000 $1,000. It's very easy to baffle people that aren't familiar with blockchain and EOS.
The difference
sort of
here,
take
though,
advantage of that.
Yeah, the difference here, though, is the most damage that would come from that is that person would get to the first round only. So minimal funding. Once you get past that first round and you filter, and you're going to have, right, we all kind of agree that that's what's beautiful about this system, is you can, even if someone gets in the first round, a bunch of other really good people are going to get into that first round. And then that person who got through, who has a less than ideal idea that just sounds flashy and convinced the layman who was rationally ignorant as to the details of EOS and EOS.io, they're going to have a way harder time doing it the second time, right? To get through to the next layer where the funding becomes more meaningful.
It depends on the percentage of people. Like, if there's only a few wives, then sure. But if there's more wives than there are, us, or what do you want to, whatever you want to call out.
Yeah, that's not realistic.
It's not.
I still think my wife.
It's something to think about, though. It's something that we got to think about. How's it going to affect us tomorrow, and how's it going to affect us in 5 years time as well.
I've already thought about it, at least from one subjective perspective. Someone real close to this early core is very different from someone, say, in the thousands or 10,000s, like you were just alluding to, when it scales. But for my own kind of thought experiment, I was going to invite two people that aren't a huge member of the Eden community, but they're very close to me. So I think I would be able to, for lack of a better word, subordinate them, or kind of calm them when it came to the uncertainties we're talking about. One of them is a great government guy with a lot of good questions from 80 years worth of experience just living and voting in every election. So I think he would get a kick out of being a part of this kind of group, and he wouldn't go on a runaway train because he would defer to me. I'd set him straight. Hey man, you got to back off of this, back off of that, whatever. The other one is very similar, but he's of our generation and very smart and all over the crypto side. But he and I have a tight enough relationship, I think, much like a spouse kind of thing, where I could say, hey man, highly recommend this, but both of cases, they're tied to me. I'm the one that invited them. It's the trust piece that flows up from the person who invited them, and I take full responsibility for it.
Yeah. You know what you said that was super cool about that, Mark, is it sounded like the one guy was 80 years old, potentially.
Yeah.
So to me, like, that's basically, now look, here's an example. We always talk about the holy grail of cryptocurrency or blockchain is when people like our grandparents will use it and not even know they're using a blockchain. And this is like you're participating in an election. A new democratic process happens to be on a blockchain. Do you realize you're using a blockchain? Maybe not. Anchor is getting pretty clean. It's pretty easy to
Yeah.
put your thumb on, swipe right like that.
But
But
it-
it obfuscates the complexity.
it's really, 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 really helpful to add that totally new perspective. And just even if it's temporary, because it could be temporary, it could be too much for that person. For the other person, they could find it not interesting, but it was a nice little tourist kind of spin through that community for that 6 months or that year. And maybe I would usher them out, and it would be all according to a natural flow. But the bottom line is there's that trust connection. I'm the guy that I found. I was like, yeah, I could do this. So I invited them both. I did.
Great.
You know,
I think we need to. We
that
need
was
to
about a
loosen our
month, well, it was
restriction.
about a month ago. It was
Yeah.
kind of awkward. I said, hey, man, I think that'd be a great idea. Come to me if you're interested, but it's an open invitation. I think it'd be wild. I told the older one, I said, I think you'd ask really good questions. And he kind of raised his eyebrows at that. He's like, oh, okay, cool. And the other one, I said, you're a intent of code is law guy. And he knows all the stuff about the
There you go.
ex machina, et cetera, that finally came out in this discussion I ran across it recently to capture it all. But
Mhm.
yeah, a few of the fundamentals, he's
Good, man. Well, now instead of just an open invitation, you need to become a bit more pestery about it, a little more aggressive. You really should. I really insist. You could even pay their way. Like I'm going to pay the way for my wife to join. I'll pay the 10 EOs for her.
Someone in the
And
chat just said they'll pay 200 EOS for the election. I have no idea what that means. It was on Eden on EOS chat.
Probably. I think there's a bit of some confusion. I don't know why people didn't read it, but basically they somehow maybe some people think if they sign up, they get 200 EOS. And that's not what it says at all.
Wait, I wanted to ask you guys a question before we moved on. So the concern we're talking about is that there's all these people that are going to come on because there's an incentive. We're going to get more money in the treasury if more people come on. But my question is, how many of these people are going to participate in the election? How many of these wives are actually going to participate in the election? Because it's not, the EOS Foundation thing was not per election participant. It was per Eden member.
It was per what?
Per Eden member, not participant.
Oh,
You're breaking up a bit, Jesse.
so I'm skeptical that, am I still breaking up?
We can hear you now. We heard you, you're skeptical. Now we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm just skeptical that this quote unquote rush of people, they're all going to participate in the election. I don't think so.
I think you're right. I don't think they all will either. And John, you know what I think this means is that if there's risk of having people, well, there a greater number of people who will be less savvy and less aware of the details, people that someone else trusts, right? So if we believe this trust network, so that means they're good people. Just means you have to make your pitch a little more dumbed down and be willing to kind of explain the basics to those who are less savvy. Just makes it harder for you to pitch, but it's surmountable.
Yeah, but then the savvy, the less savvy, more easily influenced by bullshit than the more savvy. So again, you can just I could try to sell something to you and be like, nah, John, that's just crap. That makes no sense. I don't know what you're on about. And you know enough about the EOS history and stuff to go against that. But again, I could say the same thing to someone's girlfriend or someone's wife and be like, oh yeah, that's awesome, and get their vote there. We also then say that if we're inviting our wives and stuff like that, it's essentially saying that my girlfriend, her vote should be just as powerful as yours, kind of thing. So every member that we have and come into the election process is potentially just as powerful as our own. So we've got to be careful 100%. That the people that we do recruit are of are they worth sort of diluting that that for. And again, I would argue that the standards should be those who independently are attracted to Eden and aren't just, sold it by, their husband or their spouse because, it sounds, cool or whatever. Because again, yeah, people with big families or people with a lot of friends can just bring them on, and I don't know.
That's right.
I think it's
Have
a bit dangerous.
a family reunion of like 30 people, and you just walk around with your cell phone doing the induction videos.
And again, another thing would be, say if you don't like Eden on EOS and you give up on it, Chris, and you leave, how likely is it that your wife will stay?
I don't know. I don't think I'd leave, first of all. But
if you did, if
well, she's her own person. She could make up her own mind, like in this instance. I don't think it's
Yeah.
that big. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is it's not like it's going to be a one-on-one with my wife who's uninformed in the details of EOS and the potential scammer. It'll be her, potential scammer, and 3 or 4 other people who probably do know a little more. So as long as the person, like in this instance of my wife, as long as she's not, a knucklehead, and she can like listen to multiple people with different points, and I have confidence that she could smell bullshit and suss out a good idea and a bad idea. Personally, I mean, that's why I'd invite her. That's why I'd put again, it's not about loose inviting just because I'm related to somebody, I'll invite them. It's because I actually do trust them. I think they will add value. I mean, I married her, so in this case, of course, but she doesn't, I think we can be willing to lose the restriction, or at least the preconceived restriction, that this is Eden on EOS, and you need to be rah EOS if you want to be an Eden on EOS member. I think we should consider maybe relaxing that a bit, not entirely, but a bit, bringing in good people who maybe are just kind of also more into this Eden thing, because that is what it is too. And rational ignorance should be allowed. It's in Dan's book. I know you've read it a couple times. So like, we need to be able, this is a system that solves for being rationally ignorant, yet still having a voice. Because that's what this is, right? Rationally ignorant, kind of.
I
She
think
doesn't have
it's
the time
John,
to learn about it.
Adam, we have
all
around
about
200
awareness.
members. How many are gonna, out of the 200, how many are gonna participate, do you think, in the election?
I think we'll have at least double the number of members by the time the election comes. So how many of 400?
It doesn't matter. What percent would
I'd
you
say
all
about-
say that are gonna participate?
I'd say about half.
Half, yeah, that's my guess. Half or more than half. Because even the original, the 177 we have now, they're more likely to all participate. And then it's a question of who we add, what percentage of those also participate. So I think we'll get a greater percentage of this first 177 cohort than we will of the ones we add.
Yeah. and
Potentially,
For
depending
that
who we add.
reason, I'll go with 75%, just based on it's the first one. Everybody's very curious.
It could be some big numbers. It could be, yeah.
Yeah,
It makes
but
for a lot
again,
of content to go through after the fact.
are we just looking for numbers alone? Or are we looking for numbers, large numbers, but also a large, proportion of people that, care? Because if it's just, numbers alone, then yeah, we can, invite a bunch of randoms and sell the idea of Eden, and then they sort of, jump on, there. I don't think people should just get a vote purely because they want to try out democracy kind of thing. Like, like you wouldn't invite, immigrants from a country that that live under a dictatorship and say, oh, hey, come over to this ballot, we'll give you one so you can have a go at what it's like of voting kind of thing, would you?
Well, curious you mentioned that, because a lot of countries have a very loose immigration policy that deliberately stacks the population in certain districts to ensure incumbent advantage. And Dan's process, if we're this is what ultimately was, again, so exciting, because we've all been studying this book and we all think this is this really wicked new revolutionary way of doing democracy. And some of the things it's solving for are incumbent advantage and gerrymandering and exactly rational ignorance. All the things we're sort of talking about are going to get kind of tested now. Does the process filter out these edge cases through the layers, through the randomizing of the groups? And are we going to be infiltrated with ill-informed who are going to be swindled and the swindlers at the same time? And they're going to outweigh all of us rational, caring, genuine people who are here. Are we going to become the minority and therefore lose now because the idiots are entering and easily persuaded and we're not persuasive enough?
We might also be breaking encapsulation, aren't we? Because there's the individual, and then there's the family, and then there's the church, then there's the community, then there's the state, then there's the union or whatever. By inviting wives that are only there because they're our wives, shouldn't they fall under the family thing?
We're not allowed to have family members in Eden? No, that's not the peace treaty.
What's your point?
It's about trust, man. I think, see, again, it's fundamentally first principles. What do you see Eden on Neos as? I see it as a trust machine that happens to be distributing funds on EOS. So if I invite people I trust, who I think will make a rational, conscientious, good decision, regardless of whether they are rationally ignorant or not on the details of the EOS blockchain itself, I'm okay to invite them because of the trust machine piece of it.
There's also scale to consider. John, I agree with your concerns. I think they're valid, but perhaps at a larger scale. For right now, we're so small, and the people who are interested in this, they hold EOS tokens. They're aligned in that way. And I think when we get more popular and this gets actually in the mainstream, then the issues you bring up are more realistic.
Yeah, but that's the thing, you know, once the floodgates are open, that's, you know, that's it, you know, once the cat is out of the bag.
No, because we can control the invites. So we can get stricter on the invites.
How would you propose we get stricter on the invites then?
Well, but
There's many ways.
But-
We can like interview people before, like we could only do like the original vision that
That's a
in
lot
terms
harder
of
to
trusting
do.
people with your house keys or whatever Dan said in the beginning.
yeah,
There's many ways we can make it more restrictive.
harder after the fact. John's right on that. You create new rules that we want to be as simple as possible. Okay, but here's the thing though. Even if you invite a bunch of random people and they end up in, what are they going to do that's going to harm the system? Like they'd have to do well in the election to harm the system. And I'm not sure that necessarily will take place. I don't know if they will. Like again, we're inviting people we trust. That hasn't changed, hopefully. And that's where I think we should consider what is the best approach, how should we be marketing this now to encourage adoption? And you know, the Eden chat has blown up. So are we going to maybe Josh has already spoken that our morning office hours, we start to redirect that instead of just being an office hour thing, it's more of an induction thing, and people can join to get inducted. And if you need a couple witnesses because you're going to invite somebody, join the office hours, and a few of us will be there, and we could be witnesses to help facilitate that and make it easier. But
Yeah, they're not going to make it past the first round. The wives are not going to make it past. They're not going to get any funding.
okay, speak for
It
now.
depends on the proportion. If they're minority, then sure. But if they were to become the majority, or the wives invite their friends, and you know it becomes, you know, bigger, then there's a problem.
Yeah, there's also a problem if the meteor hits the Earth.
Ah, so you know what's interesting too? We should keep in mind that there is no evidence to indicate that this 200 EOS bonus per person will persist to perpetuity. This might only be
Right.
until this first election. We all have to agree that membership has been pretty piss poor in terms of numbers. Like none of us can deny the fact that this is way lower than we all sort of thought it was going to be. So we're going to have to do something. Like I appreciate this incentive, right? That does help us all as members who want this to do well, who are here for the right reasons, who recognize that more funding is more better because we're going to do good stuff with it. So it kind of gets us a little more, personally, I'm a little more fired up about inviting people and how can we do it and how do we work together and how can we market this appropriately and get the right people. So address your concerns, John, as best we can. But still, we got to grow this a bit. Like the fact that we've gotten any money, honestly, if we're all honest with ourselves, is a godsend, because from the eyes of the block producers, if I was a block producer, I wouldn't be overly comfortable. Like Eden is not enough of a representation of the EOS community. It's 177 people. Like the community is surely bigger than that. So do we deserve community funding on such a small number of members? So we're lucky to, I mean, you know, obviously relationships help, and Dan, Eve being a member himself, and Shirley was pushing for this. So, you know, we're lucky that this has happened, because I don't think it's not intuitive to be like, yeah, of course they should get money. Yeah, it's 177 people. That's right. I don't think that's obvious. So
Yeah, I disagree. I do have a really good feeling that we do deserve that money. We have an enormous amount of intent. We have this really good organizational faculty. We have all that backs it in terms of the EOS legacy and Larimer himself. So I think this is a good size. I would have thought as probably would have been closer to about 500 people. I'm glad it's not out of control. I'd much rather it be 170 than it would be 900. And I'm like, damn, who is in here? I do treat it like a very sensitive. I think it's structured to be able to stand on its own as a precious effort, and I can give evidence of that. Just in the last hour or so, someone came into the chat and said, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. And, you know, we asked, you know, are you familiar with the tenants? And then by the end of the back and forth, they said, hey, I'm going to go back out and I'm going to read up a little bit. Thank you. Okay, see ya. Because there's a lot of meat here. And if we take it, if we treat it with great care, that care, that kind of culture will be obvious. It's designed for success. A lot of smart people, with a lot of integrity, really good intent, and excellence in like mind. It's a very smart organization. So
Totally, yeah, totally. Mark.
all that stuff makes it like fascinating in a way of like robustness and like efficacious quality of impact, and like everybody's like, let's give this a shot. This sounds like a really profitable way to spend one's time, and that's all that composure is what is going into this. So yeah, it's good enough to stand on its own, but yes, it could be susceptible, and of course we're going to guard against that to the T. But when it comes to wives, I'm totally for that. I invited a good friend who's not a super EOS guy, but he does understand code is law. Intent of code is law. He understands simple mathematics, logic, blockchain, all that. And then again, that older fella who has a lot of experience to contribute. Well, he would be quiet. He'd be really sensitive. He would know when he doesn't understand the 60-80% or 90% of the real hard technology, and he'd back off, and he'd be a fly on the wall, and he'd slowly enter based on like my name or my legacy. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Chris, you made a good point that this incentive that could potentially have a hazard, probably not going to last. We need the rocket to get off the ground, and then that's probably going to end. And I can maybe share my experience with EOSBs. Gotten quite a bit of interest, and I would say the vast minority are into Eden. Even with, okay, you're going to get more pay, you're going to get all this stuff, but you got to be in Eden. But most decline that. So we really need some help to kind of get our feet off the ground here.
Yep. This will do it though. Having a proper election, just the output. There was a guy, I don't want to name him, in the Everything EOS chat, who was very negative towards Eden, basically saying that both tri elections have been a shit show. Zero value has come out of Eden, and so I couldn't disagree more with both of those comments. But the fact that it exists means that we've got a little bit of work to do because he's probably not alone. There's probably other people who don't. And whether it's just a I hate Dan thing, right? Because that happens, and then anything that Dan does becomes now this associated negativity. But either way, I think this is an opportunity to point out of all the good that Eden can do, has done, but also can do. Like I think a lot of your projects, the fact that the funding is bigger, sounds like there's going to be more getting funding. If it's around, it says about 8 in the chief delegate round, like that's a lot more than what we've had previously. So, a lot more projects, a lot more people are going to get funding. There's going to be a lot more value created. So it's pretty exciting, and we have to make sure we work hard on highlighting that. That's what I think about this. Well, John, I hope my wife ends up with you in the first round.
John, I will not be inviting any women to this. Don't worry.
Oh, it's not women. That's the
No,
problem. It's just,
I
you
know
know, yeah, people are there because they're just, you know, buddies and,
I'm
and,
kidding,
you
I'm
love
kidding.
them kind of thing. Like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't say that my girlfriend and my brother should have more influence than Dan Larimer in a round.
Then you don't agree with the process. You're basically refuting
Right.
some of the basic tenets of this process.
No,
More equal animals, more equal. Dan is not
no,
a more equal animal.
in a sense of being in the community, because again, part of it is that, you know, allowing who gets into the community.
Rational ignorance, though. There's a whole chapter on that.
Yeah, but again, there's rational, you know, ignorance, and there's immigration.
But
Like
if you trust the
you
people,
got,
yeah, but you're making it like
you-
random. Immigration's like a random. It's not. People you trust. These are still people you trust. You would vouch for them. You think they're good people who would make good decisions, regardless of whether they know all the details or not. I don't understand why that's a problem. Like they would still. It's like you wouldn't trust them. Then if you invite somebody who like, nah, you're gonna
See,
get
but
swindled because you're an idiot.
people can have the best of intentions and still, you know, make the wrong decisions, or again, you know, lean in ways that are, you know, because again, they're not invested enough in EOS.
Right.
Again,
But
why?
it's only the first round though. That the only risk from that I see it is you're right.
Again,
you might get to the first round. But that's
based
it.
on the percentage. If it's a small percentage, then yeah, the first round will.
And you don't trust the system. Then you don't trust it. Well, you're questioning this, which is fair. You totally fair, and your point is totally valid. But you're basically starting to dispute some of the basic tenets of this process. Which this is the test. This is what's cool, right? We're gonna see now. Maybe like we're gonna have all these videos to watch and see. Oh, you could tell this person had no clue what they were talking about, and Buddy is totally talking shit that got her to vote for him. Like it's gonna be there on IPFS. Like so, we'll get to see this after the fact, right?
John, why do you think that the people who don't care or know about EOS will become the majority?
Who knows? But and anything's possible. But again, you know, we have the luxury now of having, you know, a strong border and, you know, sort of designing this, you know, on ground one. And if there is some incentive to invite, you know, more people later down the track, whether it's, you know, through an app or, you know, some sort of bylaw or, you know, whatever it might be, then again we can, you know, get in trouble. And if we don't sort of address it now, then by the time it happens, it will likely be too late. And then, you know, we will be in the minority to make any changes to the bylaws or whatever it might be. And then, you know, we'll get in trouble. Like say that, you know, the 10%, you know, thing, what if it was, you know, 30%? But what if there's so many people in the community that aren't even participating in voting, right? That we can't even trigger the thing. Like EOS mainnet. Remember how long did it take us to get EOS mainnet going? Because there was was it a 20%?
Yeah, voter apathy. I remember that.
Yeah. How long did that take?
I think it took a few weeks. Or
it took a few weeks.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's an, you know, example.
There. That's a good point. That's, in my personal opinion, really the only valid point from this majority of people who don't care taking over. Yeah, but the elections happen regardless every 3 or 6 months. But yes, that seems like a valid risk there. Voter apathy.
Yeah. But I think there's enough people who can, but that's the thing, they just don't participate. If you have voter apathy,
there's always going to be risk.
You're not opting in.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, but sure. But if you have voter apathy, you didn't click opt in to the election. You didn't actually open your phone and participate.
No, but John's saying that if there was some sort of emergency or something, and we needed at least 10% or X% of people to trigger an election, and they had to do something to trigger that election. If there's a lot of people who are not active, then we cannot make those thresholds.
Potentially. Yeah, it depends on how that's right. It depends on how that election triggering works. Like that's what I was saying before, but I don't think it should be the entire Eden population. It should be like a level up or maybe even 2 levels up and do.
Or just voting participants. If you've participated in the election participants versus Eden members.
Yeah, maybe. Sure. better than nothing. I personally, I think it should be at least one level up because they're more trusted. They have already aggregated the views of the base layer because they were
To
winners.
change,
So they
we're talking about changing the bylaws, right?
we're talking about, yeah, like petitioning, yeah, either you petition a new election because we sense fraud, so we want to pull somebody out, so petition an early election. The bylaw changes, I think that all comes from, for the first year, Dan. Like Dan is in charge of bylaws for the first year. But after that, the way I currently understand it is you'd have the chief delegates. I think that final, I don't know if it's just the petition winner would do this. I think it would be the, I don't know, but I think should be the delegates would propose bylaw changes. They would probably have to 2/3 plus 1 agree with them, and then they get ratified by 2/3 plus 1 of the next round, next election, right? But that's still not even clear. Like the bylaws are loose. That
Yeah, but that's interesting. What decisions are made by this 10% of the whole Eden population? Because you just described that these major decisions are made by the chief delegates.
Yeah, well, the bylaw changes.
That was just to trigger a new election. That's
Yeah.
for everyone.
Yep, currently in the peace treaty, so currently the rule that does stand is elections occur annually or may be triggered by a petition of 10% of the membership, according to the bylaws, which don't clarify this. So this is where, again, even the peace treaty is unfortunately ambiguous because it's relying on something that doesn't even exist. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Mel, it's money, Mel. EOS tokens.
What did Mel ask? What's the value of new members who have limited knowledge on EOS and projects and would be very unlikely to get through the first round? The value is that first they add, I mean, the basic answer is you get 200 EOS per person to the treasury. So that's value, that's extra funds for the winners, people who do well in Eden. It's more money for them. So we should all, that's good, right? We can all agree that that's good. But in terms of what value they bring, so again, using the example of my wife is a smart person. She knows lots about finance and accounting, and she would ask good business questions to whomever the project was that she'd vote for. Even if she couldn't understand the underlying tech, she'd ask. So she'd bring whatever skills and knowledge she has, she'd bring that to the election. I think that's value because I trust her. So assuming we're not just inviting random people, right? Because we should never have done that. If we're still going to stick to the fact we're inviting people we trust and we think we could trust their decisions and put in a room with 7 people talking about things, and do we trust that they're going to pick somebody who's reputable, and then that's good enough in my mind. I think that there's value in having them.
What about, yeah, I don't know. Couldn't there just be a conflict of like, because what about the rules that we have, during the elections? Because there was, say you're in a round, it's an hour round, you matched up with 6 people, and you're trying to decide who's the winner of the round. What if you finish your round half an hour in, you put in the votes, yours is done, your wife is still in the other room, in her round trying to decide, thing. Like how it'd be pretty easy to be like, just look at it, look at our screen, see who you like on that list, and be like, all right, vote for him.
I could do that. I could do that over Telegram to anyone.
Yeah, but
Doesn't need to be my wife.
in this current stage, each member well, ideally anyway, given how small that we are, is sort of there individually, and has their sort of own opinions and own desires of what they want out of Eden. But if we invite those who are there because we love them or whatever, then again they can be pretty easy, much easier swayed essentially.
I think you put too much credit on the value of your pre-existing knowledge of EOS to make a good decision. I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, I think that's an attack, vector essentially. Like I could do it. I could get my girlfriend on Eden, and I could tell her who to vote for. But yeah. I don't want to do it because I don't want 2 votes. But that's something that I could do.
But you could do that
easy.
Right. But you could have done that prior to this incentive, and you could have done that prior to it being your wife in the other room. That's what Telegram's for. Welcome to, like, you could do that. I could have numerous sock puppets, but they all have to be able to speak for themselves. They're never going to be able to move forward if they can't think for themselves and have a good pitch. So the most damage they could do is influence the first round voting for someone else. That's the most damage they could do. And every single one of them, you're paying 10 EOS a year to get them in. So there's a cost to actually executing this attack. And what do you get out of it?
Yeah, but say I'm running and my girlfriend smashed with you in that round. I can say, shit, I don't want to go against Chris. Chris is a threat to me. So I'll tell her to vote for anyone else. Doesn't matter who, and then you know you don't get through, and then we've lost.
No,
You know,
she doesn't have veto power. There would be 2/3 plus 1. So what if the rest?
yeah,
agree?
but
I
if,
could
say
convince the rest. Then it'd have to end up 2 of your girlfriends, which, you know, you could have
Yeah.
harem, and that's possible. And yeah, but then again, it's the odds of probability. And don't forget that first round, which could be 300 people, are being randomized into groups of 5 or 6. So the odds that you're going to have invited enough of your girlfriends, unless you're like some crazy horse nut, in which case I'm looking forward to this app you're going to make. Right? So I mean, it's mitigated risk. Like, I get your point. These are always, this has always been a risk, though. There's never been, like, there's no reason why this has always been a problem, that you could invite sock puppets, but the most damage they could do is vote for someone else. They're not going to be able to move forward because they are a hollow shell, right? That's sock puppets. So again, the damage is mitigated because all they're doing is affecting the first round voting. And then once you get past that first round, you have a lot of other good quality people mixed in with whatever sock puppet damage could have been caused by the randomization of how many sock puppets you're going to throw in here. And is it going to look sketchy when you've invited someone who invites 30 other people, and then you watch the videos of later on, you're like, wait a minute, your voting doesn't even make sense. You didn't ask any questions. Like, so all this is going to be suspect, and forensically you could be looked at post-election, right, to see if there was some trickery going on. And maybe that leads to people getting kicked out if you could sort of prove that there's, again, bylaws are loose here. So how do you kick people out? I don't know. I just don't. It's worth a try. I mean, this is the thing. Like, why not even just test the system? This is a great, like, if Eden is going to be this new thing that could change the world and change democracy, fuck, let's try to break it. That's the best thing we could do to it. If there's a problem with the system, then sure, let's try to break it. You know, it's on the person who invited the shitty people, though, and the sock puppets. So it's still going to go back to, who did you invite and how did they demonstrate themselves, and is that going to make you accountable, and then you get kicked out? We got some questions here. Let's see. Mel says Chris just wants his wife to vote for him. I absolutely do, Mel, of course. She's going to not only vote for me, she's going to shill for me. Whoever she ends up with in the first round, she's going to basically say, whoever she votes for, you need to vote for Chris, is what she's going to say. I don't know. She may even try to run anyway. Vote for me, and then I'll give the money to Chris to do what he wants to do. That's another option, right? So, okay, we've got comments here. Dario had a question. If we have a lot of people who want to join Eden, how do we organize us best now to onboard them? Yeah, great question, Dario. And I think there's no easy answer because we've yet to figure this out. But certainly for the office hours, Josh and I have, we briefly spoke about maybe kind of revamping those to be more about induction hours. And then if a few of us are on, and we can maybe do more of these open mic type of thing, maybe we could do a couple scheduled Zoom calls that can be open. And as long as we have 2, we only need 2 Eden members, you can come on with who you want to invite, and then there'd be 2 witnesses, and we can just bang out videos that way. And then Josh had a point here. Beyond the talent currently lacking in EOS, I suspect that having new members who want to help support, create, evolve new Eden-based DAOs on the Eden's public network would be meta fabulous. I agree. Right, John? So we can invite people who may not know a ton about EOS, but they love the DAO aspect of what Eden is, and they would want to use the Eden OS software to have their own version of Eden that just runs, like, so not part of Eden on EOS. They want to create another for their high school or for their local baseball team, coaching, whatever, right? So maybe they join Eden on EOS to learn about it, and then take that information and bring it over to their own DAO they want to create. So that's another angle.
Well, hopefully we can let them learn about it, about giving them a seat at the table, though.
You're so nerd. Why do you not want more money? Like you want to run for more money, dude. Like you are gonna
I
pitch. Do you not want there to be more funds in that pot?
will, if we got strong governance and good leadership, then then the money will come. We'll make our own money. You know, we won't need to be given it.
Yeah, eventually, but not for October 9th.
Yeah, not for October night, but
Right.
again, we got enough money as it is. Like, you know, with the amount of how far we've already come, you know, now with so little money that we have, you know, we'll work it out. We're smart people, you know. We'll get it done. I'd rather good you know, leadership, good governance, and less money than more money and at the cost of governance and leadership.
But do you think, okay, so leadership, keyword, you used it a couple times there, an uneducated EOS person who is trusted by someone in the community, so therefore must have some sort of semblance of good judgment, could they not still pick good leaders, even though they don't know what EOS is?
Not as good as someone that is both a good person and knows Eden. Oh, and knows EOS. Sorry.
I don't know. Leadership shouldn't be
Like
dependent upon
they'll
the
be
software.
good, but they won't be as good.
Oh, yeah, okay, maybe. Wow, then you're, I mean, this is the thing. You're creating an objective that is unrealistically high. You're gonna have to go with the Pareto 80% good enough here, right? We're not gonna get 100% perfection, but 80%. So it's a person who's got good judgment, trusted by somebody else. Okay, they don't know everything about EOS. I think that's close enough. More comments here. Mel says, I think it would work with other Edens, as Joshua was speaking about earlier. Mark Shear said, good night, y'all, taking off. Mel said that I want my wife to vote for me. Yep, absolutely. Dario says, maybe then we would be good to have the Eden induction hours at different times for all time zones. Yeah, Monday early morning, Tuesday lunchtime, Wednesday afternoon, and Thursday at night. That's a good idea. And Mel thinks he likes that idea. He agrees with John. Yeah, Mel's more skeptical about this, John. You and him have a similar view on the risks, which I don't disagree. There is a moral hazard here with numbers and extra EOS funding, but I don't know. I think we've got to.
Well, Dan doesn't think it's a risk. Maybe that means something.
If you trust the process and you still invite people you trust, I think the fact that whether they know a lot about EOS or not is not clear. Joshua says, I really resonate with the quality over quantity. Realistically, we do need to attract people beyond the existing EOS community and use funds to build stuff that works really well and is actually being used in the real world. And yeah, and then Jay has a question. How is it, John, you see Eden profitable in the future?
There's, I don't know, there's all sorts of ideas around it. One of them is a sort of product that I'm working on. I'm bringing into Eden in the next couple weeks. But I think
just tell us all the suspense.
But I want to make it cool. So yeah, we'll be patient. But I think again, one of the, you know, valuable things is again, you know, our unique identity. I think, you know, there's a lot of use cases for that, and a lot of dApps, like so many dApps, have been throttled by, again, you know, unique identity. Like, again, when I was working for Karma, a lot of the problem, you know, we wanted to pay for people's CPU, we wanted to pay for RAM and stuff like that. We had no issues putting in the money, but then we couldn't because, again, you know, bots and stuff like that. So, you know, having a sort of unique identity solution that maybe Eden can provide as the community grows would be pretty, you know, amazing. But yeah, I think decentralization and again, if we can prove, you know, good governance, I think we're a brand new type of entity essentially. You know, how is there such thing as, you know, decentralized communities that have, you know, verified, you know, unique identity, where people are, you know, regularly showing, you know, their faces, you know, kind of thing. So I think there's plenty of there's plenty of business use cases around that.
Well,
And
Pamelo's
especially
going to use it, right? Pamelo's going to use Eden membership EOS Costa Rica. Oh, John, this might be interesting to you. So EOS Costa Rica has built, when they did the EOS Rate tool, eosrate.io, where
Yeah.
you can go onto their thing and use your Eden membership account. So they have, I guess it took them it was a bit tricky to be able to pull the Eden members accounts from the tables that it was in on the smart contract. It took them a bit of time to get that worked out. So if you're looking to leverage the Eden accounts, you may want to look at what they did. They open sourced it. I'll follow up with Lewis, Diego, their comms guy, because he's going to point me to the spot in their GitHub repo that had that. Because that's something they highlighted, that they took the time, they spent a lot of time, or a bit of time anyway, communicating with the Clarion team to work out how to get the Eden accounts from the tables properly.
Oh yeah, I'll have to do it. I did one way. It was a bit dodgy, but I do have one solution. But yeah, I'll definitely like to check out theirs. Did you say it's just on their GitHub?
I don't know where. Yeah, they open
Okay.
source it. I don't know exactly. I'm not proficient enough at GitHub to understand how you would find it. But I can at least, I'm gonna post a tweet about it and share this with the community again to
Beautiful.
highlight how awesome EOS Costa Rica is and how ridiculous it is that they don't get paid ever. They've never been paid as an EOS BP. Shocking. Hey Jay.
Hey, question. So I know that Dan's working on the bylaws right now. One of the provisions that we could suggest be addressed in the bylaws, and this is piggybacking on what John's idea is that what about our own self-sufficiency down the road? If we're going to be part of our model of our group association is to have a for-profit component or arm of our Eden community, then we're going to want to give that some consideration. I mean, for example, in the US, we can have a nonprofit corporation, but then there can be a subsidiary that's actually a for-profit business that's under the umbrella of a nonprofit group. So that seems to be an example of what could match up under the Genesis Eden, if it is like John's intuition says, well, we're going to become self-sufficient. Well, that's why I asked the question, what is that going to mean to the group, and how are we? And so the bottom line, from my perspective, is that we should be intentional about that up front and put a provision, or suggest that a provision be put into the bylaws. For example, think of the Girl Scouts. What do they sell? Girl Scout cookies. So, they would be concerned about, product liability or someone getting sick from the Girl Scout cookies. So you would separate a for-profit business underneath the umbrella of a nonprofit association. And so, and I think, think we were talking about the talent within this group. I think we're all excited about, including John, about the dApps that are out there, that if you have true identities, then it solves a whole boatload of issues that we faced thus far.
Yeah.
And I think Eden, the Genesis Eden, is well positioned to not only tackle the DeFi governance issue, but that would start with having the ability to govern ourselves well. And so I want to propose that the step one would be address it in the bylaws, and then I obviously would have ideas that I've started to float about. Wyoming is pioneering the effort in the crypto space. They're doing amazing things, including allowing crypto companies to set up a sandbox where you get a year and a half. You just contact the authority in the state of Wyoming and say, hey, we're going to be operating an association. We're thinking about some business ideas, and we want to have a safe harbor to define what that's going to look like, so that we're, like I would say, as necessary, comply with all laws, that we're going to need to be intentional about doing that ourselves.
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. When Eden's receiving this funding, who's receiving it? What's the entity that's going to do the taxes on that? Disclose all the disclosure. Is it? How's that work, right? Because it's a lot. It's
Yeah.
not an insignificant amount of money.
I'll try and make a post in
Could-
one of the forums and put a link into, no, obviously not on this call, but back into our chat about suggesting how we could kind of tackle these types of issues, which obviously should be addressed in the bylaws for the benefit of the group, and also to kind of help us create our vision of, like that Girl Scout cookie example may not be a bad idea to help us spin our wheels in a direction like, yes, we are absolutely going to be about marketing our brand and profiting from Genesis Eden as an organization that knows how to do business.
Yeah. Well, Dan, in his first post, after Eve came out with the announcement of the foundation, and then Dan had his post shortly thereafter where he was supportive of Eve, and he mentioned that the support was sort of contingent upon so long as the foundation supported Eden. Until Eden was sufficiently funded to deprecate itself from being tied to the foundation. So that speaks to the self-funding nature that even Dan must have in his mind. So hopefully, I know he's aware of the Wyoming DAO. I know it's been brought up to him, but I don't know if anything is being done about it. So
Right.
Jay, it's probably it's a good idea to maybe bring that back up and see if we can. I mean, Dan should have an answer to this, surely, because when the money shows up in Eden account, it's kind of going to have his name all over it.
Right. No,
Guys over
I
there.
heard him mention that even for the initiation of the grants to the foundation and then also to Eden, that the attorneys were conscious of, what does that from a flow of funds from one organization, and there's a question about Clarion too, which is also kind of an interesting. I'm not sure we're going to want to have a precedent of doing de facto approvals on large budgeting, but that's kind of an example. It points back to what I'm suggesting, is that we have a need to be thoughtful, intentional, and put it not only into our bylaws, but then I'd like to see us take one of John's ideas and run with it and make
Yeah.
some money off it.
Right. It's smart because, like you say, and then having this upfront and clear from the beginning, it facilitates other ideas to then leverage that kind of
Right.
platform, that cookie cutter, to then, okay, well, that's how they're going to do it, to then kick back to Eden and do a for-profit business. Well, we could do that too, maybe.
I think I saw Joshua just suggest, well, if we're talking about funding that's within the Genesis Eden network, and it's not leaving within our own network, then we're not really, triggering any tax consequences, et cetera. And I don't disagree with that at all, but I think one of the visions that I think is a natural outflow, I mean, it's my gut feeling is that I'm excited about participating within the Eden community because we're going to have some blockbuster ideas happening that we need to put into practice. And I think it's also realistic. It doesn't matter how deep your love is for EOS. It's that we also, both of us, everyone in the room has 1 foot in the EOS world and 1 foot on the real world of, the three-dimensional physical world that we have to interact with and eat food. So, so there's my point, and we have governmental systems, whether we are in alignment with them philosophically or not, they're out there. Every country, is a sovereign state, and we're going to be interacting with those by necessity. And so we just want to be thoughtful about it. Like I say, comply with all laws to the extent possible. I love what Josh was saying. Like, hey, if we're in the network, we're not triggering any outside issues. But my point is,
not if you transfer funds.
Eden will be even better. Will be a better Genesis Eden if we do have some type of interaction with the real world too. Have fiat on ramps.
Yeah, there's a couple comments here that I don't think is accurate. Mel said it's classified as money only when it's liquidated into fiat. That's not my understanding. Cryptocurrencies have value. They're valued in fiat. But if I send cryptocurrency to you and I never exchange it, you should be declaring Like I've done a disposition of my cryptocurrency. So in Canada, we do an adjusted cost-based calculation. So when I give cryptocurrency to you, even if it's a gift, I still have to account for that in my adjusted cost base. So even though I haven't converted it back to fiat, and you should be then also, it's like if I gave you gold, I don't convert it. It's still, oh, it was a question. Is it classified as money only when it's liquid into fiat? Oh yeah, no, it's not. When you transfer value, there's a deemed disposition on either side there. Is that right, Jay?
Yeah, and so that's why I'm so passionate about this, and it's why I also am starting to hammer on the state of Wyoming, because what's exciting about them is they just passed a law that says specie, which is any type like printing your own checks in the state of Wyoming, that you can, if a federal court says, hey, that piece of paper is legal tender, then Wyoming says, and you're darn right, in our state it is legal tender, and you're off and running. So the implication there is that after a federal court says a printed new type of dollar can be legal tender, the state of Wyoming is conscious that cryptocurrency could quickly fall. It's not yet
Exactly.
passed law in the state of Wyoming, but the whole purpose of Wyoming becoming the crypto capital of the world is to say, hey, you know what, people, cryptocurrency is a thing, it's happening, we want to make it, and it's so obvious import, whatever your philosophical bents are, is like to say, hey, if we can comply with the laws to the extent possible in nation states, let's do that. And I think Genesis Eden is so I guess it was Mel that asked the question, what's the law? Well, Mel, stay tuned. The law is unfolding, and we're actually have an opportunity, and that's why I say I'm suggesting that Genesis Eden, because it to me it matches what our identity is that we take the lead in not only showing what decentralized governance looks like, but show what decentralized compliance with the nation state laws can look like in a healthy, fruitful way, so that we want to be good neighbors, not only to each other, but also to the nation states that may want to harm us.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, exactly. Joshua said, so Mel, if the cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, for example, now in El Salvador, because it's now been identified or recognized as legal tender in El Salvador, if you buy something with Bitcoin, you don't have to pay capital gains on the appreciated value of your Bitcoin. So right now in the US and probably in the UK, when you go buy something with Bitcoin, you have to not only pay for the good or service with your Bitcoin, but then you also have to do a deemed disposition on the relative value of the Bitcoin when you paid for it in fiat versus the value when you exchanged it for the good or service in fiat. And that difference in cost base, you then have to also pay capital gains on top of the good or service. Where if it's legal tender, no longer now do you have to pay capital gains. It's just a straight transfer for good and service. So it's what Josh said here. If we can get, can we set up a foundation in El Salvador and make EOS legal tender? Sure. We just got to get them to first make it legal tender. We'd have a better chance in maybe Venezuela, although I'm not sure how the government would appreciate that, but generally a lot of use going on there.
So was the question just, should Eden be a foundation? Eden be a legal entity in order to distribute funds?
So my thought is that, in going back to that Girl Scout cookie analogy, is that I think the Genesis Eden has a complete decentralized governance mission, purpose, and to learn with each other how we can set an example. Here's what good neighbors can work together and what it looks like to govern a blockchain, and to show that we're willing to step forward and participate as a community of real people. We can be a node, people nodes. You know, we're legitimate. We're working above board. We're showing each other that you actually can live in a just society to the best that we can. And then the next question is that, and John, you really kind of sparked the conversation. You said, I think we're going to be for profit. I think we're going to be sufficiently self-sufficient down the road. And I agree with you on that. But in order to make that happen, we have to have, I think it's almost obvious that as an association of the Genesis Eden, we're essentially I've heard Dan use the word, mutual benefit society, which is fine. I mean, we can, whatever label we put on ourselves is fine, but we also, in my mind, will want to have an arm that's for profit. And so I think that since that's what reality is going to dictate, we should do it intentionally. And so to answer your question, John, I would say that the umbrella Genesis Eden would be a foundation. And then we should have a business arm that probably plays around in the sandbox in the state of Wyoming to, and it's interesting because the DAO, to be a non-governmental government organization, or DAO, whatever you want to call it, DAC, or whatever you want to call ourselves, that we have to comply with that, whatever quote unquote laws apply to us the best we can. But I'm suggesting that not only as a DAO, but as a for-profit piece of our umbrella DAO, that we should be actively initiating projects that move the ball forward concerning, let's see what Genesis Eden can do as 10,000 member series LLC in the state of Wyoming. And we can write a smart contract that sets up fractional ownership with 10,000 people and buy a piece of land, or invest in John's DAC. But one way or another, we're going to want to start earning revenues that are for-profit driven.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
And
It
I
needs to
don't
be
think
established.
fractional ownership within a legal enterprise, that in my mind solves a whole plethora of issues that crop up, where we just need one CPA to do a filing for 10,000 member entity, rather than worry about spending up 3 days without sleep trying to figure out your own personal finances. We can just have one printout for the Genesis Eden Wyoming Series LLC, and do centralized accounting for our for-profit arm. And I think that's a natural, and that's why I suggest that it'd be something for Dan to think about in the bylaws, is that, do we want to go down, do we want to start out, a lot of people might give some pushback and say, Jay, I mean, that's not really the central focus of step one. And but I think it is. I mean, I think the purpose is, whether we like it or not, we have one foot on the ground in the three-dimensional world, and we have to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, it's like, yeah, like it or not, Eden's going to receive a boatload of funds here. How is that being done legally?
Yeah, what's
From the start.
10,000 members times 200 EOS in a as a general partnership in a fractional investment fund on October 9th?
Yeah, exactly.
Over 100,000.
It ramps up fast. And even just when you receive funding in this, is everyone clear on how they need to be accounting for that individually? If I win and I receive funding and it goes into my account, your face is there. This is pretty easy for the IRS or CRA to do a peek and check, did you disclose this funding? So people need to be aware of that too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to pool our community to make it simple, and that's obvious. That's a great way to create a model that can really take off, is to show, we can write up smart contracts that show how it's done, and match them up with our nation state tax forms, only where necessary, but where necessary, we need it.
Yeah, I think there's a value there for a service. You figure we're going to do these elections. EOS is going to be around a long time, and these are going to happen. They're going to happen often. There's certainly a need to have support for members to, hey, by the way, here's a few examples of how you need to consider this for taxation purposes. And it could be, you could have a business, you could have your own LLC, you could be your own not-for-profit, whatever. You could have all these different ways to do it, but it wouldn't hurt to provide that as a service from Eden members to Eden members.
I just saw Joshua's comment about he's getting excited about purchasing a Vatican-style plot of land where we can have the Genesis Eden with Satoshi Barnes in there as the Pope.
I wouldn't mind a compound. We need somewhere to escape to all this tyranny. Maybe we need to. This is the overarching that we need to set this up. Someone's going to run on building an Eden compound.
Right. Oh, you gave away my pitch.
Let me know. Yeah, don't be
right.
a secret about it. I'm looking for a place to escape. Tyranny is at all angles. It's not so bad in Canada yet, but seeing as our Commonwealth neighbors in Australia there, it's looks it can get pretty rough. What do we got? Liberland, exactly. Yeah, Dario, maybe. That's actually
Yeah.
the best bet right
You
now,
know,
Dario.
I-
Yeah.
I'm excited about October 9th, and you know, it's fun when we see that there's a lot of fun behind these ideas that really work. You know, like Dan likes to say, hey, when we pull together as a community, you can do a whole lot more with 10,000 members than you can with one member. You know, and you know, he likes to say, you know, you can use a brick to prop your door open, or you can build a whole wall with those bricks. And so it's exciting to think about, you know, the power that we can have in pooling our resources. And so it's going to be, I'm excited. I think it's fun to see all the talent in the group, and I think it's going to work well.
And this will
Quick
be your
question,
first
guys.
election. Oh yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
I'm just in Eden members Telegram, and Eve LaRose. Eden just received 240,000 EOS grant. I thought it was 200,000.
No, let's go. In the members.
Yeah, just scroll up like
Oh.
kind of a bit.
Eden just received a 240,000 plus EOS grant from the EOS Foundation. Oh, probably because current membership.
I thought it was only new members the incentive.
No, it's not worded that way.
Oh,
The wording is so 200,000 EOS plus an additional 200 EOS to the community treasury per Eden member who joins before the election. So I don't think it's anything over and above the 177 that were there at the moment that this article was published. I think it's just Eden members prior to election, 200 each. So that's why he's put 240,000 plus, because it's not a fixed number. It's dependent on how many more. Right, it's actually not quite 240 if we want to do the math appropriately. Right, let's see here. Yeah, it'd be 235,400 if we're going to be precise based on current membership, one pending. So I think he just rounded up to 240,000. Eve is on. He could comment in the chat if you want, but that's how I read it. And I don't think it's not, yeah, how many are added between now and then. It's just total members at the time. Total pool of funding will be allocated by elected delegates. Yeah. So, and then, yeah, what his comment? Focus, please. Yeah, we are focused. Well, focusing anyway. I think we'll, and Daria, your comment about maybe switching up the office hours to different times, I think that's a really good one. Josh, you're still on. Yeah, did you catch that when Dario mentioned we should do maybe varying timed office hours to help focus on member induction and just welcoming committee of sorts? If not, I'll ping you after. But that makes sense. Yeah. And then I guess, okay, so yeah, Eve makes a good point, right? How do we want to focus on how we're going to spend this? So is there anything that we should be doing as a community? Like those who are here are arguably some of the most committed in terms of like the time we've put in. Is there anything that we should be doing or could do to help facilitate pitch building and collaboration where possible? Part of it too, keep in mind, right, when you receive funding, there's going to be probably, we assume, because it's not written yet in the bylaw, but the tariff piece. So there's an incentive to use Eden members for your project. to have more access to funding and not give it back to the pot? Were you considering that, John? You better invite your potential devs to be Eden members so you could not have to worry about that.
Yeah, actually, I do have a couple more mates that I still need to invite. Is Kenny of Crypto Rada on there yet?
Sean
think-
is. Yeah, I think Kenny is. Isn't he?
I think Dan Larimer promised him an invite ages ago, and he's been holding out for it. I think he's I don't think he did.
Chris, I think you were saying a couple weeks ago that I think it's a good idea. Just you're gonna draft a document, like what are questions that should be asked.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
That could be good, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, to prepare voters, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one. I will. I think that's a good one that we can maybe we can do a bit of a brainstorming session in Slack. That's almost like a marketing type of thing. But yeah, that's a good one. I'm just wondering about just facilitating projects and I don't know. I mean, how do you facilitate that? People are either gonna want to build something or they're not. Dario saying he can do all week posts on Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, and Telegram, asking, are you an Eden member? Do you prepare a pitch? Do you think about a campaign? Do you think about a campaign before the election, etc.? Kind of same like that Zach did to the Eden members channel. And Josh is saying we can use EOS in a box to be custodians of the owner keys and private active keys for questionable members. Hijack their account. Maybe. I don't know. That's, yeah, I like simple. Like I like less rules are better. The more they can't scam us if we have the keys. Yeah, true.
EOS in a box is awesome. I hope that Ami writes more documentation on that.
I'm sure he will. Yeah, we'll do videos.
No, he hasn't on his website. He hasn't done a new post since July.
No, well, because he wrote. So yeah, I haven't. The video from today, we did it at a meeting yesterday, and I will try to get that out before I go to bed tonight. But basically, I don't know if you saw the one before that, the written update from the board. He had it working kind of. It was like spaghetti code, so he kind of went back and cleaned it up and rewrote it. And so he's expecting to have sort of a test that we can use this week. He's hoping.
Yeah. Not even about that. It's just like an overview of how it works and like what it is.
Yep.
Because
Yeah,
people,
once
they
he
don't
gets it
know
working,
about
yeah.
this. People don't know about this. I feel like, I don't know.
No, it's too early. You don't want to tell a bunch of people about something that isn't purely defined. There's still a bit of like, and in fact, he might have run into one small roadblock about WebAuthn and what GreyMass has available, and he may need to collaborate with them to help almost code something that they probably will be working on eventually, but isn't quite there yet. So there's a bit to do still, and I think because it's not quite, he hasn't quite formulated exactly how it's going to work. It's hard to then create content, but that is the plan, Jesse, for sure. I've offered to help Emmy do any sort of how-to video and help with any of that. So that it'll come though, for sure. And what might happen is the original sort of greater vision of what EOS in a box could do may not be realized yet. It might just be like, it kind of works, but it needs this, this, and this, and so more funding, more time. That might be what comes out of it, in which case, Emmy can take the idea, or someone else could even take the idea and run with it if it's not finished yet. But as a concept, like you say, it's an awesome idea. There's no doubt. It's just some tricky bits and then trust and account recovery, and how he's thinking of maybe using the EOS, having for Eden, when you do a video induction, you could do that for wallet. When you create a wallet for somebody, you do a video induction, you load it up on IPFS. So then if that person needs to do a recovery, you could then do another video like live as the person who could be responsible for the recovery. Like for example, if EOS Bees were on an MSIG that could do that as a service, you could then watch the video, confirm with the person, is this the same person who set up the account via the video in IPFS and then is requesting recovery.
So I was talking to him in the Slack channel, me, him, and Josh and Randall.
Mhm.
And what we're trying to do, well, first of all, he agreed that having an Eden induction in the beginning is a little too labor intensive for the onboarding people, EOS user support. So I think what we agreed on was government ID plus socials up front, and then in a key change request, then you do an Eden style video to verify a key change request.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm so excited about it because we're all trying to collaborate. The bees, EOS user support, and EOS in a box. Because ideally, we'd like to show the community like a measure of success from the bees. So if we can somehow track, okay, the bees brought this many accounts in, and these accounts have a balance of X and own X amount of NFTs, that's objective value from the bees' work. And so we bring them to support, and then support onboards them using EOS in a box. So yeah, I'm like incentivized obviously to see EOS in a box do really well and fund them.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's the latest. We were just talking about it earlier today.
Yeah. And sure, yeah, how do you measure the success? I think that's a great way to be able to point to how effective bees have been. And if you could tie accounts and then how active are those accounts, it's, yeah, certainly makes it for a good justification to fund or continue to fund something that you're doing, right? Fund the bees thing
Right.
and grow it, expand it. Yeah. It is a good idea.
Wait, sorry, was there the mention of KYC for getting inducted into Eden?
No, he's talking about the
That was for EOS in a
application.
box.
Oh, okay.
That's Ami's project. Yeah. But it's early. Did you pay attention to that, John, at all? Like, do you know what he's trying to do?
No, I didn't quite follow.
Do you want to explain it, Jesse?
Oh, the technical details, I have no idea. WebAuthn, this, I don't know.
Yeah, essentially he wants to create a WordPress style website that you could host. You could host this little package on your website and then have people that trust you to then create an EOS account where you would keep the owner key using your like website link app, like your website edition. You have the owner key as the owner of that website, but it's tied to the domain and everything. And then they use their WebAuthn on their phone as their active key. And so they don't have to worry about keys basically. It's to onboard like your grandma into an EOS account and have her not have to worry about generating her own key pair and owner and active key permissions and all the things that can be confusing certainly to some. So it just abstracts that layer. And all they need to worry about is WebAuthn, and they need to just know that the person who they trust has control over their account. So this is where it's obviously low funds and this isn't ideal. And then how do you do recovery? And what if your domain, like what if your website breaks down, or what if you hit by a bus and you're the trusted person who was in charge of all these accounts because you onboarded your aunt and your auntie and, well, same thing, and your cousin or whatever. So then what happens if something happens to you and they can't? So do you then you make use of the MSIG piece and then you say use the bees as a trusted MSIG or Eden, some sort of
No,
form
yeah,
of
EOS
Eden
support would be, that's the big thing, like
EOS
for
support? Yeah.
tracking purposes. You have these different boxes, EOS in a box. Each box has inherently has like a referral tag. So EOS support is going to have multiple boxes where they onboard people from different sources, and the bees will be one source for one of the boxes.
Yeah. Eve has a question here. How will Eden measure success of past funded winners and whether they completed what they pitched to win? That is a great question. I am hoping to be the answer to that, Eve. It's this auditor piece where I will reach out to each recipient. I will have them sort of describe in plain English what are their goals, what is their roadmap, and yeah, basically just that. And then based on that, I will follow up with them, and then I can create a portal, a web page of sorts that has all that's listed out with roadmaps, with deliverables, with the timeline tied to each deliverable, and then I just follow up. How you punish, like what do you do with that information? I think that's obviously the subjective piece and the trust piece and the reputational damage piece in future elections. So, and that's where I think the value of having an auditor is good, because it creates a one-stop place that the community can go to then educate themselves on previous elections and successes or failures, to then take that with them into the next election. And even during an election, that website could still be open and there, and you're matched up with somebody and you can see what their EOS account is, because it shows you in the web app. You can see everyone's EOS account that you're up with, and then you could type that into the website maybe, and it'll bring up any previous work that they've done, previous awards. Could you even have voting record? I think it'd be interesting to have like a one-stop portal that just is like a highlights of all the Eden members and their history. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I'm thinking. Because that's key, right? I tried really hard during the first trial to do that final forum post that basically, here's exactly what we did, here's every single transaction, like, so very transparent and clean and unambiguous as to whether it was achieved or not. Some of this, obviously there's going to be a lot of subjective measurements though, right? Different types of things are going to go through, and then how do you measure success? Case in point, bees receive funding. How do they define success with that funding? So it's an important question to be asked, I suppose, just during the election process itself, right? As we're debating on who to vote for. A question.
Also, I think
how do you succeed? What does the win look like for you here? What does it look like? Go ahead, Jesse.
I think it's also interesting to consider how tolerant are we going to be for failures? And a failure is not necessarily bad. Like, we got to try some stuff. So that's interesting perhaps to think about too.
100%. That's again subjective, right? And this is where me as an auditor, a potential auditor, I would be unbiased. I would just present information and have it not with any sort of opinions. And then the reputational damage will be up to the voter and the person and their history and other things they've done, good or bad. And maybe, like, for example, Ami, like, what if Ami, he runs into a roadblock here and he's unable to deliver on what he had promised during the second trial election? I still think Ami's a good guy. He certainly probably is trusted. I think he but maybe someone else might not think so. No, he fucked the dog. He didn't really try very hard. But and that's also key, where the auditor piece, if it's frequent and you do frequent updates and you can see the chronology of the updates, and there is enough detail, hopefully, of what roadblocks have you run into, what are you doing about trying to resolve these roadblocks. The other thing that I could do as an auditor is help solve some problems. So not just be just a reporter, but even try to like look for solutions and assist if possible, because it's I think there'd be value there in aggregating who is good at what, and maybe not everyone's aware of who is good at what. So if they can bring a set of problems and you can sort of be able to point them in a direction, why don't you talk to this person, because that actually might help fix what you've run into. That would be useful. Difficult, but useful. We need a repository. We need like an Eden member repository that has a list of skills and services and things that they can do. Oh, John's smirking. Oh. I want to play poker with you.
Yeah, you might get something a bit like a repository.
We'll ask no more questions. We don't want to ruin the first opinion, or the first right. The first impressions. Often you only get one of those. So
yeah.
That's pretty funny. That came up, like the idea, like Mel still on, yeah, like Mel and was talking about doing a project portal, but part of that was also, I think, Mel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was also considering trying to have Eden members also have sort of, it's not just for projects, but also Eden members themselves, because there's going to be a need for like this job posting board, again, depending on how high this tariff gets. But yeah, Mel says exactly. Because these tariffs they may not be inconsequential, like 5% 10% tariff. Okay, what if it's like 30%, 40% tariff? If you spend your EOS from an Eden election and it goes outside of an Eden member's account, what type of tariff do you pay? Because if it gets high enough, that is another great reason to incentivize Eden members to join, because there's going to be more opportunity, or I guess a greater demand for people to offer products and services to keep the funding within, so they can achieve more with the funding that they received. I suppose the one risk is you could say that could be gamed. Say I receive funding, and then John, I want to send it to Coinbase, but I'm going to send it to you first. You're within Eden, and then I don't pay a tariff, but then you send it to Coinbase for me. Right?
Sure.
That could work. But this is again where the forensics comes in. So then the auditor would, okay, show me the transaction that you sent to Buddy, and then you watch the account. I guess it depends on how much work the auditor does, but you could.
Can you say that again? How does that work?
So again, this is we're in speculation zone here, because this is going to be part of the bylaws. But Dan has mentioned the idea of a tariff, right? Where if you say, so Jesse, okay, EOS Bees receives, you get funding, you've got 10,000 EOS, and now you're going to start paying people to do work. So part of that is going to be paying your worker bees, right? And then you're going to want to have them as Eden members, and I think that's already a requirement. So then when you send from your Eden account to their Eden accounts, it's just a straight one-to-one. Whatever EOS you send, there's no deduction. But then say you need to pay for a graphic designer, and you haven't found one.
No, we're paying our Scout Bees. The Scout Bees don't need to be Eden members.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so if a Scalpy isn't an Eden member, when you send them 100 EOS, there might be a 30% tariff, for example, just random numbers. I don't know what the tariff will be, but there could be, say, a 30% tariff. And that means now that because you're sending from your Eden account that received the funds, and you're sending it to an EOS account that is not an Eden member, there is now a deduction.
No, I get that, but how are you going around the rule with that example that you said with Coinbase? I didn't understand.
Because if I sent it to John, who's an Eden member, there would be no tariff.
Right.
But if John sends from outside, because he didn't receive the funds from the Eden election, right? So he wouldn't be subject to that penalty because he didn't receive the funding. I've now paid him internally, sweet, and no tariff. But now he sends it to wherever he wants. Because I have EOS in my Eden account. I'm not going to be paying a tariff every time. I put it there myself. So I'm not going to pay a tariff to send money, to send EOS out of my Eden account or my EOS account that's tied to Eden, because I put it there ahead of time. So how's that going to be reconciled, right?
Oh, really?
I don't know. Again, we're in speculation.
again,
This is bylaws that don't exist, and we don't know.
Wait, so if you
Because
send from my EOS account, so if I get funding, my EOS account is jesse.gem.
Sure.
But
your EOS account
all
is
the
tied
accounts,
to your Eden membership, though, right?
so if I send it out, if I send, which I was planning to do, if I get funding, sending those funds to an account like EOS Bees Queen is an account that's not tied to Eden,
you'd pay a tariff.
Okay.
I think, again, this is where these rules don't exist yet, but that's usually how tariffs work.
If we see the money, say, go to my account, then again, the community be like, okay, well, if John got money, why did John, get money? What was, John's role in this? Or if again, a new piece of work comes out, and then we can say, well, hey, well, who made this logo, or who made this project? It looks really cool, and so there'll still sort of be that accountability.
There'll be a trail.
So it should be, there'll definitely be a trail.
But it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense because it's staying in EOS. Why should there be a tariff if it's staying in EOS?
It's because we want to keep it within Eden, the Eden treasury.
But
it's the idea of building this community and independence on ourselves, right? Or being independent of outside. We're dependent on each other. We're trying to incentivize our own internal economy within Eden. To me, it makes sense to have the tariff to incentivize an internal economy. What doesn't make sense is there's this gray area, and like you want to use a centralized account, like a central account, to facilitate the work you're going to do. That's kind of a gray area, right? Where you should be penalized in that respect. But paying from that account,
community is EOS.
I know.
Well,
EOS is too small for this.
it doesn't exist yet. We're talking hypothetical. Maybe it won't happen. This is but I know Dan has mentioned it. I think it's interesting. I like the idea of, domestic content, and you pay a tariff to have it leave, and you then encourage within Eden, and you encourage more members who offer products and services because they know they have a greater likelihood of then benefiting from that by giving their product or service within the Eden membership. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm for that. I think that would, again, then it forces, reputations to be formed. Then we know who we can, use in the future and stuff as well.
And
Right. So you have to onboard people into Eden if you want to pay them without paying a tariff.
Yeah. Or you onboard a sock puppet who doesn't participate in any election, and you pay the sock puppet to then fill up your Coinbase account. But again, it's all on chain. So it's still going to be, it might be
Right.
outside of the rules. It might be allowed, but it's only allowed until you get caught, and then it becomes obvious. And that's, again, I'd love to see how the tariff wording is written if it does come to exist, because there is some nuance here.
Because there's also skin in the game as well when you're on, Eden through your reputation. So again, if you pay some anonymous account and then you come back a month later and say, "Oh, hey guys, I gave 10 grand to this guy. He never replied to me. He hasn't done the work." Then again, that guy gets off sort of scot-free. But if he's forced to go on Eden, at least he's, exposed his face, he's exposed his name. So if he were to, screw up and not do the work that was, requested of him, then again, he pays that, social toll, and he can't come back to us. He can't work for us again. Whereas he could potentially, trick some other guy 6 months later down the track to also give him money and do the exact same thing. So he can't milk it as well. He's only got one chance.
Yeah, this is what we also have to keep in mind, right? This isn't going to be perfect. There are going to be unideal outcome and unideal recipients who are going to do less than stellar results. This is it's just a product of numbers. Like you mentioned, John, a lot of people are going to be inducted now that may not be ideal. And yeah, one or two of them might get into that first, maybe even second round and get some funding. It's not all going to go where we want it to go. We just have to accept that. But it's the question of how much in terms of a percentage, and is it enough to cause harm to the network and to the community? And is the good that comes out of it going to far outweigh a few of these outliers? I would say, I would argue yes. I would think that there's going to be way more good. There's no way that a scammer is going to, well, they might, but I think it'd be very difficult for a scammer to make it up to the final round of an election. And then, of course, they'd have to randomly win to then be able to walk away with only a percentage of 5% of the thing, right? So I don't know. I think it's a really low chance to have that happen.
Yeah, and it just makes our existing community more engaged. So if we need someone to do, graphic design, and we don't want to pay the toll for it, we'll first go into the, Eden on EOS chat and say, "Hey, who can do it? Otherwise, I got to pay someone else on a 30%, toll." So it engages more of the community, keeps us close together.
Better still, they go on the job board. The job board that's visible to all EOS and non-EOS members. And hey, look at all these awards and all these jobs that are getting. Look at the internal economy being created in Eden. That's another whole marketing pitch to increase membership. Hey, you've got some skills and you can do some stuff for other projects. Join Eden, because you have a higher likelihood of being awarded funding to help these projects get built. Right? Like
I get
John,
it. Yeah.
John Heater was on earlier, and he wants to project manage his account creation portal, whatever it's going to be. He wants to project manage that. Well, he's got to find devs. He's going to be incentivized to find devs within Eden because he'll have more funding to then work with. And the funding he doesn't get to work with just goes back into the pot. It's the other beauty thing about this, right? It's not like it's the government taking it to go spend on wars and fancy hotels. It's going back to the Eden Treasury, which just means that it's more distribution for the next month's allocation. So I think that's why I like this idea of the tariff. To me, it's cool. It's just, how does it get gamed? How difficult is it going to be to sort of police it? And then what are the penalties if you are being...
Yeah, and what's the actual number? Like,
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if it's 5%, whatever. 30%, okay. That's meaningful. Because even as a recipient, you want to pay taxes. So say you're Jesse you're gonna get paid in EOS to do something. You got to pay tax on that now. So does that mean I got to pay a tariff to pay my taxes? That's kind of shitty. So this is where I think there needs to be some sort of nuanced gray area that you can somehow put a petition in, or there's this list of excusable things that you can do. And then as long as you provide sufficient documentation to some sort of centralized entity that subjectively is looked at. I mean, I don't know.
When
It gets a bit tricky.
In what context did Dan mention this? Was it like,
I think he mentioned it. Oh, and I seem to recall he might have mentioned it in the fireside chat after the second election, and the four of us were on talking with Dan on that YouTube video. I thought he mentioned it there, but I don't know. It might have been before that. I don't know. It's all a blur now. It's been 4
but he,
months.
so he mentioned it one time on a call.
It might be more than once. I feel like it's come up. I don't know. Yeah, it could be. It's not in a bylaw yet, but I know he for sure mentioned it, and it's been talked about plenty. I know I brought it up a few times in different conversations. So the idea is definitely floating around. With these caveats that this will be difficult to police. I don't know. I don't have any conversation.
How would it be difficult? You just program it, right?
No,
To do the tariff?
it's to allow for the outliers. Like, you want to pay taxes. Should you be penalized on that? I think not. You want to use a separate
Oh,
account, and you want to use a separate Queen Bee's accounting EOS account to do your payments from, and not your own personal account. Do you have to pay a tariff to put it into that account that isn't an Eden member, right? Because you've moved it from your Eden member EOS account to this.
Right.
So that's
It's going to be all or nothing. Like,
or I don't. Yeah, that's what I don't know. I mean, this is this is the intent of code versus code is law approach to tariffs. So if the intent is to keep the money within the economy, then you should allow for some of these subjective outliers, right? Like paying taxes, or paying, like, say, internet hosting fees. You're gonna create a product service that relies on an internet. You need to buy a domain. You need to pay basic fees like that, web hosting. So how do you pay for that? Do you have to pay a tariff to then pay for that? Maybe. I think it's kind of shitty, like, because it's an unavoidable type of cost.
it's just too tough to go through all these edge cases. Like, I don't see that as realistic.
That's what I mean. I don't know. This is what we don't know much, right? The bylaws are still loose, as we've all seen. They haven't been updated in many months. So I'm sure that's now that this is coming along, I'm sure Dan will be certainly aware that we're going to need better bylaws. So hopefully he gets those out to us in advance to remove ambiguity, especially as it comes to pitching, because you're going to be pitching with sort of a funding allocation. And if there's a substantial tariff, that might really throw off your budget.
Oh, it completely changed my thing. Yeah.
So it's important to, might be worth having a series of questions to send Dan's way and see if we can catch his ear to just provide clarity. It's probably a good idea. Who has Dan's ear? Yeah. So what else is going on? Alan, and JC Crown, some new people. If you guys, feel free to say hello if you want to. You can also chat, but if you want to say any words, especially if you're not Eden members, this is a great chance to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, JC here. I'm just kind of getting a feel for things and hanging out and seeing, what the culture is like and what you guys are talking about, and just, just spying for now.
Right on. Did you just recently hear about Eden? Is this through the recent sort of announcements with funding?
Yeah, I'm in like a million EOS chats from earlier on, literally probably a million. And I started seeing people talk about, and I think I was in an Eden chat from a long time ago, but I'm not sure. I might not have been. And I started seeing like bubbling up a lot of activity on it. And what's going on with that? And so I just started paying more attention, and that's kind of what I'm doing now.
Cool. Well, if you have any questions other than hanging out, don't hesitate. If you're, anything come to
my
mind.
process is sometimes it's just, seeing what it is rather than knowing what it is. So, I mean, I don't even know to some extent. I mean, I know the very basics, but not really. And I intentionally didn't read that much either. I'm just kind of, you know what I mean?
So you have a pure, unbiased sort of opinion on what you've pre-read. You're just taking it all in.
And this is, I'll probably just watch for a week or two, or who knows, and then read.
Sure. Well, I mean, the Coles notes, basically, Dan wrote a book, More Equal Animals. It outlines a lot about what is wrong with democracy, plenty of points there, and basically speaking to what is a true democracy. And then he provides a sort of method that is the Eden OS method, and that is the method that Eden on EOS is using, which is sort of fractal democracy, a political playoff, these different terms that are used to describe it. But essentially, you take the community, in this case, it's the Eden members community, which there are currently 177 members of. And an election would, those who voluntarily want to participate from within that membership, they all show up on a Zoom call at the same time. So you can't have, it's symbol protection, you can't have multiple people on at once. You can't be multiple people at once. All the people who are participating are randomized into groups. The group size has varied. Not in our application, it's been 4 people per group, but it could be more. In Dan's book, it speaks to up to 10 people, but really it's arbitrary. But the difficulty is that within your group that you're randomized into, you have a discussion. In this instance, it's a 50-minute discussion. And at the end of the 50 minutes or during, you come to consensus in a 2/3 plus 1, so greater than 66%, would vote for someone to move forward, to represent that group. So basically that person has sufficiently established consensus amongst that group to aggregate the voices and opinions of all the people and to earn their trust such that they are willing to then vouch for that person and vote for them to move forward to the next round. And in this application, so in terms of democracy, this can be applied to sort of any group of people for any sort of purpose to establish leadership or representatives. Could be high school leader, could be governments, right? In this case, it's establishing or selecting people who are going to be responsible for community funds. And now it's funding from the EOS Foundation, from the EOS name and RAMS fee. So it's EOS token holders funding essentially. And in the election process, they work their way to the top and they are then in charge of, they are given the responsibility of spending community funding. So during these rounds, when you're talking amongst your group, you're trying to listen to and select who's the best person who has an idea to spend funds, but also could be trusted. And this is where it's kind of a reputation game where people, if you break trust within the community and it's well known, you'll likely have a more difficult time to convince people to vote for you and trust you again. And the other thing, the opposite, is if you've proven to be trustworthy and you've delivered on your promises in previous elections, for example, or just in life, and people are aware, then you likely have a better chance to be voted for and move forward. And
sorry.
Pardon me?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were finished speaking, but you weren't. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm done. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, so I have a buddy of mine who is an Eden member, and he expressed that he'd be willing to vouch for me. I don't know how that works, but when you mentioned about, we're voting for people who are, have ideas, are going to be responsible for community funding. Should I even try to be a part of Eden if I'm not necessarily wanting to be, not that I don't have ideas and I've managed teams in the past, but if I'm just wanting to participate in voting because I want to say in who I think the other people are, should I still want to be a member, or only if I'm trying to compete to be all the way up?
Excellent question. And if you care about the future of EOS, this is where it's Eden on EOS. So the focus is whoever ends up with money, and there'll be a few people, ideally they're using that money in a way that is good for the EOS ecosystem. It's good for the EOS token holder. And so if you're an EOS token holder and you'd like to have a say in how funds are spent, then this is your opportunity to do so. And so, yeah, not everyone, in fact, the majority of the people who participate aren't going to be moving forward with a project. That's perfectly okay. But it's just a matter of whether you are a token holder and you want to be involved such that your voice is then heard to help influence those who do receive funding and what they do with it to promote the ecosystem.
Thanks, Chris. That helps.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the questions, and certainly anything else. You're hopefully it sounds like you're on the of the many Telegram channels. The Eden on EOS Telegram channel is where a lot of questions I think are coming and going. I'm a bit behind today now, but by all means talk again there. And if so, you have a friend who's already in Eden, your ability to enter is actually much simpler because someone already knows you who's a member who trusts you. Because the key here is we want to build it's a network of trust, right? So ideally, you're inviting someone. If you became a member, you could then invite others. But ideally, you're inviting people who you trust because they're tied to you. All the inductions and invites are done on blockchain. So everything's on chain. And so when you become a member, you have an NFT that's minted and has your picture. It's got your EOS account, the name you choose to go by, any other socials you choose to disclose, but also who invited you. And so if it turns out that you're a scammer and you're here and it's blatant that you've scammed the system and done something egregious, that will also reflect negatively upon the person who invited you. So how that
Yeah.
manifests in terms of punishment, hard to say, but it's there.
Yeah, the guy who's talking to me about vouching for me is like, if you ever decide you hate this, you better quit first.
Yeah. Well, and even still, right? This is where it's such an interesting thing because even if you decide you hated this, the damage that you might personally be able to inflict is very mitigated by the process itself. Because the most damage you could do, it would be to try to participate and steal money. So in order for you to do that, you would have to participate in an election, be sufficiently compelling to actually convince people to vote for you more than once, because you got to get that first round is random, and that'd be a mix of people who don't want to move forward and people that do. But then when you get to that second round, then you're randomized. It's all the people who move forward from the first round, and they're randomized into smaller groups. And that'll be far more competitive because they're likely all going to have maybe some good ideas, and now you're going to have to compete with them and not only like you got to convince them to vote for you and not their own idea that got them into that first round. So it gets a lot more difficult to move forward after that first round, and therefore mitigates an ability of a bad actor to sort of move up and then move up again and then get the random win to actually take the top prize, which is randomized at the end. It's not even a vote for the big winner.
Yeah, so you'd have to be very deliberately a scammer to even, and then get very lucky or be very persuasive to
Exactly.
do that.
Exactly. And yeah, exactly. And then even still, the most damage you can do, this is what's also great about the 5%. It's like the ability to rug pull, it's not like you win and you get this huge lump sum of EOS. It's not. You get a small allocation every month of what you get, right? So the damage you can do, not only is it restricted in that respect, but it's gradual. You can only do so much over so long. And assuming there's an auditor, which I'll try to become, then there's going to be very real-time accountability with the reception of funds and how they're being spent. And if there is a bit of a scam going on and it becomes obvious that the big winner is actually scamming, it's not clear in the bylaws yet how this works, but there is an ability to petition amongst members to trigger an early election, which then would remove this scammer because they would then lose their access to funding because an election came early. And then every election, new recipients will receive funding. So there's no long-term guarantee. There's no guarantee that you get it for 6 months. It's just you get funding between when the election happened and the next election. In that window, if you're a winner, you receive funding every month. But definitely encourage you to have a look at Dan's book. Are you familiar with Dan's book at all? I'll put a link to it here for you. I'll throw it in the chat here. There's a free PDF, and it's a really compelling book. A few of us have started. Well, most people have read it. I'm actually one of the few who haven't read it, but I am currently reading it. And we're doing a bit of a reading group every Friday on YouTube live at 1300 UTC. And it's like we're doing 20 pages, roughly a chapter a week, and kind of highlighting all the key nuggets from the book to with the goal of after 11 weeks, we'll have like a TLDR of the whole book, which I think will be nice. This is a great example, right? It's like telling you about this great thing, and here's a 220-page book for you to to have a look at. It'd be a lot nicer to say, here's this great thing. Yeah, you could read a book, but here's 5 pages that summarize it. You could also just read this and get sort of the Coles notes and have an understanding of the concepts. So we're working on that. John, are you going to come on Friday for that one?
I'll try to. It's like 11 p.m. my time.
Oh, it's late for you. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I tried to come before, but I ended up just falling asleep because I get up pretty early. So yeah, I'll do my best. Have some coffee, see what happens.
You know, you're getting old when 11 p.m. on a Friday is just too late.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can relate, man. I can relate.
Especially if it's like, more equal animal stuff, like, you need a bit of a brain for it. I'll be probably fried, and then you guys will say something, you're like, oh yeah, sure. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we
so-
got a Alan here wrote hey Chris, it's currently 2:30 a.m. here in France. I'm not able to make noise. Fully get that. Alan, we've got a few people on like that. Definitely will be ready next week to introduce myself with audio and video and participate. Awesome. I have witnessed the birth of Eden OS and followed the progress since then. I was working on decentralized groups for a few years, helping a group collaboration with blockchain, actually launching the EOS journey in the start of 2021 to help newcomers in the EOS ecosystem, and already have built a small team. Oh, nice. Thanks for all this great exchanges and the possibility to ask questions. Yeah, no problem, Alan. Or maybe it's Alain, if you're French. Great to have you here. And yes, apologies for the time. This is certainly the time zone challenge persists. We do open office hours. Well, they're called office hours, but I think for the next month they may become sort of Eden onboarding calls. But they're at 1300 UTC every day of the week except for Friday. And we've been doing those for a few weeks now. And that was put on by this most recent chief delegate group. Well, myself and Josh at least. So if you want to ask any questions and put a face to the name, by all means, hop on that. We put the link every day, every morning in the Eden on EOS Telegram channel. So if you're around and you want to hop on a call then, feel free. It's also a good chance to do inductions. So maybe jump on, we can get to know you a bit and give you an invite. And if you haven't yet, definitely would recommend putting an intro post in the Eden Community Members Forum. Let me put that in the chat right now for you. If you go there, you can sort of introduce yourself. And then when you're talking to new potential members, just have that link handy. And then, or like when you want to become a member and have someone invite you, just pass that link off too, because it gives a chance for someone to read about you and understand your background. The challenge with the digital community, right? To establish trust, it's, you got to do workarounds. I don't know. I don't mind the video stuff though. I think you kind of get a feel for people a little bit. Oh, already done. Nice. And you received an, you're done, man. You're good to go. Alan's in. He's already received an invitation from Mark. Sweet.
So how does that work? My buddy who's already in Eden, what would be the process if I wanted to be a part of it for him to vouch for me and become involved? Or do I need to get, more than one person? I saw a bunch of people on the member list that I know.
Yep. No, you only need one person to vouch for you. And then what happens is there's an induction video that needs to be recorded that's uploaded to IPFS, and that is tagged to your membership NFT. And so all that is the one person vouches for you, they're your inviter, and then you have two witnesses who just are Eden members who participate on that call, and all their job is just to validate that there's a human being named JC Crown, and I saw his face and it matches the picture on his NFT, and that is the same dude. And that's it as a witness. That's all I would need to do. And then the fact whether you're trustworthy or not, that falls onto the shoulders of the person who actually invited you.
How does he get that process started? Like, he can't just, make a video, right?
Yeah, so there's a script. So if your friend hasn't done an induction yet, that's probably something we should do, eh? I should probably do a quick video how to. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. So basically,
he was wondering. He was actually asking me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what? Thank you for these questions, because this is a really good point. You assume, right? You kind of forget what you don't know or what you do know and assume other people know it. So yeah, all it is there's a basic script that everyone's been, you don't have to read it, but the point is on a video call, your face is there, people can attest to that, but then you've read the peace treaty and you will abide by the peace treaty. So you have to kind of attest that you will do both of those, that you have read it and you'll abide by it. And so, but there's a script for that. And basically I should maybe put up a bit of a post, or if you want to get your friend to ping me, by all means, have your friend ping me in Telegram. I answer my DMs, and I can help them, just point them to the page where the script is. I can even put it up here for you. And you could pass it off. But essentially, they just enter the name of the person who they're inducting. They have their own name, and then the witnesses have their name. You record the video on a Zoom call where ideally it's in gallery view. So you get 4 of you on a call. All videos are turned on. I just put the script up in the chat there. You read through that, and that's it. You record it, and then after that, your friend will go to the member portal, and there's just an invite. There's a button you can click there. It says invite new members. He puts in your EOS account that you want to tie to your Eden membership, and then also the EOS accounts of the witnesses. Hit send. That's it. And then there's be a link that comes from that. He'll then send you that link. You'll open the link, and then you'll sign in with your EOS account. Ideally, you've got Anchor set up because it seems to be most efficient and works well there. So you'll open up your Anchor, you'll sign in with your EOS account that he's invited you with, and then once you're there, you add your picture, you do your profile, and there's various profiles. Some are very short, some are more long and elaborate, talking about yourself. You should put an eoscommunity.org account name. That's where the forums are. Twitter, if you have it, any socials that you choose to disclose, you don't have to. And then once you complete your profile, the inviter plus the witnesses, they look and they verify, okay, this picture is the same guy in the video that I saw, his name, like everything, all the links work. And then they just hit check. Yes, I checked it. I agree with it. They endorse it. All the 3, the inviter and the 2 witnesses, do that. It goes back to you. And the last stage is you just pay 10 EOS from that Eden account, the EOS account you have tied to Eden. Then you're done. That's it. You're a member.
Nice, awesome. I like how it kind of doesn't necessarily rely on, a whole having to, get together for each person. Everybody can, if you're a member, you kind of can do it on your own.
That's right. Yeah. The biggest hang up has been getting the 2 witnesses. And so in the past, when there was fewer people, it was a little more work, but now with 177 people and a few of us who are quite present and around a lot, it's certainly gotten easier, where you can usually, when your friend, if you want to, move forward with this, it should be pretty easy for your friend to just put a chat in the members group saying, hey, I need a couple people to witness, and usually we can hop on. But definitely, if your friend has any questions, don't hesitate to have them PM me. I'm Chris Barnes 1 in Telegram, and pretty active.
Awesome. Will do. Thank you, Chris.
Yep, no problem at all. Nice to meet you, JC.
You too, for sure.
More members, the better. 200 EOS each. Yeah, I suppose we should do a quick video on how to invite. That is a good point. So much to do, John. So little time. I'm getting my proxy out this week. The website's almost done. Registering my accounts. I set them up today.
Your proxy, what? Your voting proxy, or
the Eden members approved proxy?
Ah, right. Yeah. Sick.
Yeah. I gotta get it out, or I will have broken all trust and not move forward in the next election. But yeah, it should be good. Yeah, and if you can, check out the rate tool to at least vote for your favorite BPs. You don't have to vote for all of them because there's a lot and it's time consuming, but pick a couple of your favorites. Be appreciated.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll post more about it in the members chat to kind of push people to get on it. A gentle once a week push. Alan, already done. Would be honored to be inducted by you, Chris, if it's still possible. Yeah, I mean, I could witness it anyway. Certainly, if Mark's already done some research on you, Alan, then he can invite you, but I could witness it. I could for sure be there. And if you come on if you do it on the office hours, which I think we will rename to induction hours, I'll definitely be there. They're pretty consistently, except for Fridays, because that's when we do the video. More Equal Animals. Man, the last one was 3 hours practically. We were on trying to go over the second chapter, or I guess, yeah, second and third chapter. was so much to highlight. Dan's book is awesome. You're right, John. Like there's so much, you got to read it a few times to catch it all, right? There's so many
Yeah.
like wicked nuggets in there. It's hard to not highlight the whole thing. The guy was like, we should do like a reverse highlighter. Just highlight the parts I don't need.
Yeah, I would often like be at the park, like read a chapter and be like, shit, I need to like take a walk and like reflect on that to like really, you know, absorb it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did listen to the audiobook, but again, because there's so much to take in, I feel like sometimes the audiobook can go ahead of me sometimes.
Yeah.
Because like I could stay on the same page for quite a while and then be like, right, okay, that's what he meant by that kind of thing, like repeating myself. So yeah. But yeah, I think wrapping it up into yeah, like you say, 5 pages or whatever would be beneficial because it is hard to sell. Hey, read this 220 page,
Yeah.
you know, book.
Yeah.
But then again, you don't want to. I don't know. You still need to leave a bit of mystery, because you don't want them just reading the 5 pages and then thinking that they know enough about the book. Because there's again so many nuggets. Like you're not going to be able to make into 5 pages without sacrificing
100%.
some good nuggets of information that is worth knowing. So
Yeah.
you need
Totally.
to sort of seduce them a bit as well. Don't tell them like, you know, these are the facts and like that's it kind of thing. Like,
There's,
you know,
there's too
maybe
much. He's given too many points.
yeah, maybe leave a few things open-ended so the, you know, the person's like, oh, how are they going to deliver on that promise, or how the hell would you fix, you know, XYZ, the 2-party system, and then, you know, entice them further into the book. I don't know. It's you got to find the right balance, don't you?
And I think there could be a few outputs. Like one of them will be a less trimmed output that might be 20 pages. And then you trim that further to make a 5-page, and trim that further to make a 1-page, and trim that further still to have just like a couple bullets. Is it even possible to like just distill it all down? Because in marketing, that's kind of what you need to do in a way, right? You need to be able to really zero in on something that's compelling, intuitive, and like you say, maybe trigger some curiosity to look further, but still gets the point across. There's a better way to do democracy. Which there is. Yeah, I don't know. Are you nervous about the election? I became nervous.
No, I'll probably run, but again, I'm not too nervous. Again, I'm pretty happy with where the community is at, so I think they'll make the right, the right choice and where they want to go and stuff like that. So
you're gonna run.
Yeah.
If you have an idea, you're gonna run on it, right?
Yeah, I'll run, but yeah.
Well, maybe diversify depending on your funding needs. Maybe you want to have a few people pitching also for you. Right. I know I'll be looking for things to pitch on besides, because there's no way that an audit service would justify certainly the big win, but I don't even know if I'd be able to spend it all as a chief delegate. So I'd be looking for other stuff to put it towards.
Yeah.
I think there'd be a few people like that. I think that'll be a legitimate angle to run on multiple projects. I'm curious what Dan's going to run on, because he's already got reimbursed. That was the other bit from that article, eh? Did you notice? Or you hadn't read it yet. But part of what came up there is the foundation has approved a separate grant to Clarion OS of 100,000 EOS to reimburse the Clarion OS team for the time spent designing, building, and deploying Eden on EOS.
So how much EOS?
100,000.
100,000 EOS. Is that for what they've already done, or you said reimbursed? Did you?
It is reimbursed. Yeah.
Right. So one. So if how much is EOS USD at the moment?
It's I don't know, 600 grand, 620 grand.
So $600,000 for what they've already done on Eden on EOS or Clarion?
It says, let me share screen. The EOS Foundation has also approved a separate grant to Clarion OS of 100,000 EOS to reimburse the Clarion OS team for the time spent So past tense, time spent designing,
Yeah.
building, and deploying Eden on EOS. Going forward, Clarion OS will continue to fund the development of the tool for the EOS community in advance, and the community, via Eden or the foundation, can choose to reimburse us after reviewing our work. Oh, right, because this is written from Dan. This isn't Eve, of course. Yeah. I misspoke earlier, I think, if I said that. I find that interesting.
Yeah, well, I guess he would know how much time they've put into it, but yeah, 600 grand. I didn't know. I don't know. Is it is it worth $600,000?
I don't know either. And
Actually, then again, they did all the smart contract work. I kind of forgot about that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's
Once
a
you
few
put in the
guys.
smart contract, I was thinking more of
Fancher,
the front end. Yeah.
that's paying for Mike Manfredi, Brandon Fancher, Todd Fleming, Thomas Halgren.
Yeah, if you got Todd
Dan.
as well.
Todd
That's- yeah.
Todd is worth probably $500,000 a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Nah.
So
if Todd's there, then yeah, that's, if anything, that's actually pretty cheap.
I think those guys are actually making less money. Those guys are probably making less money than what the market could afford to them.
Yeah,
I think a lot of those guys
I-
are working for principal and greater. What's the benefit of the greater good, essentially?
Yeah,
So-
I go back on what I said.
Yeah, you know what? I'm curious though now. What is Dan going to run on? Because
Yeah.
I was always under the impression he would be running on this reimbursement piece, but that's already been taken care of. So now, what's Dan going to run on? And yeah, I don't know. If I'm teamed up with Dan, I'm not sure. I think there's a few angles you could probably like. But do you really need the money, Dan? I mean, come on now. Don't you think it'd be better to give it to someone like me? You know, a lowly, multi-millionaire.
Yeah, I don't think. I think he sort of. I don't think he needs the money so much, but again, he just it's got to flow through to prove that this is viable kind of thing. Because while it's not so much money to him, but the money to the position, to the role, sort of thing. Yeah, perhaps that's why. But I don't think he would actually run. I don't know.
Maybe
he
he
doesn't
won't.
sort of. I don't
Maybe
think
he
he
won't run.
participates enough in direct, Eden running. Again, he said he wanted to be more the philosopher rather than the leader.
He had said previously he didn't run because he was funding it. So it made
Yeah.
it sound like he would had he not been funding it. So I thought I heard him say that he would run, but he didn't. So maybe not though. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It'd be extra interesting is if he got teamed up in a group with somebody who maybe was in fact more deserving than him, and would he be so humble as to actually give his vote to someone else? That would be the true test. Because he doesn't really need the money. We know that much. So that's where it'd be an interesting, how he would approach that.
Yeah, well, he's still got the bylaw powers anyway, doesn't he? So
He does.
whether he's elected or not, he's still boss.
He still has the bylaws. He just won't get the funding. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's the one thing I'm most nervous about is an early matchup against him.
I'm sure you'll be all right.
Random luck, not against him though. That's the thing. I don't think it doesn't matter who you are. Any of us would have a hard time with him just because of name, regardless of compelling pitch.
Yeah, but again, I'm sure. Well, if he's been looking at Eden at all, he'll sort of know the worth you are to the community, and so he'll be faced with the question. He's like, "Oh shit, I'm in a room with Chris now. If I go ahead and I deny the community Chris, am I going to deliver the same value that Chris would?"
Or anybody.
Is-
This is where a lot of people who
Yeah.
are a little more vocal than Dan because he's not as present. Yeah, you're right. But here's the other good thing. I was just thinking when we were talking earlier about inviting like my wife or the randoms who don't know a ton about EOS but are good judges of character and are still people we trust, they would be less swayed by the presence of Dan if they were in a room with him because they wouldn't know who he was. So actually there might be a benefit to take away from this sort of popularity piece by having sort of less knowledgeable voters in that respect.
Yeah, well, I raised that point before. There's a difference between Dan Larimar and Tom Hanks kind of thing.
Right.
Like everyone loves Tom Hanks, but you know,
Not
at least
everybody loves
well,
Dan. That's a good point too. It might be
well,
a
but
detriment.
the point is that you know you could still love Tom Hanks, but he doesn't know a thing about EOS. But again, you know, if you love Dan and he knows about EOS, like you know, there's still that separation
Yeah.
there. So yeah, there's always going to be celebrity. Like you know, we could say that you're a bit of a celebrity in the Eden community.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it goes out when it's for real.
Yeah, man. Well, we've been at this for 3 hours. I'm ready to pack it in if you guys are. You should probably get your day going. Is it weekend? Is it Saturday for you now?
No, it's Tuesday.
Oh, Saturday. Fuck.
So
I
yeah,
totally had a huge brain fart. Yeah, it's Tuesday for me. Thank you. Somehow I thought it was Friday today. I don't. That
Oh,
shows
okay.
how much
Yeah.
attention I got.
All right, cool. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, John. Thanks for the participation. And Jay Troy, JC Crown, and Alan, thanks for hanging out, guys. I'm going to shut her down unless you have any last minute comments. Alan, thanks all. Good night. And I
Yeah,
did
thanks for your
see the
time,
bottom
guys.
of my screen. Oh, go ahead, JC.
Oh, sorry, I just had to get the mute button off. I was just saying, no, thanks for your time.
Awesome. Cool, man. Well, hope to see you again on here for sure. And I hope you, I hope this has been sufficiently enlightening to convince you to want to join.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Yeah. And Alan, I did see my DMs pop up from you in the corner here when I was doing this. I just didn't flip screens to be focused on this, but I'll definitely get to those in reply. So thank you. Awesome. Okay. Good night, everybody. Talk to you soon.